that is because you wouldn't have a reason otherwise.
So you don't
Talk
have
to
a
the
substantiation to your argument. You're just counting on the fact that you can't
No, I
substantiate
said
it.
to you, no, I gave you a reductio ad absurdum. Then unless you accept that God is the ground of all being and has revealed himself through creation, and hence the actual basis of universal invariant laws of logic, then all you will be left with is you will have no identifiable defensible ground of all being, and hence you'll be an extant system.
Yeah, but you're framing your claim in a negative that it could not be any other way, and I'm asking you to substantiate that portion of your claim.
Check the chat board.
Yeah, I did. I appealed to the revelatory disclosure of God's existence through creation, that all temporal states necessarily indicate the eternal, and they could only do so if and only if the eternal was God.
Yeah,
The
but
non
okay, that's
let
the
me
claim.
no. Hey,
And
listen.
I'm asking
No,
you for
yeah,
the
but here,
substantiation behind that
no.
claim.
I just gave that to you.
No, you didn't.
All right. Listen, you're not. You're. This is going over your head. All right. So I'm going to go through this slowly. Okay. There are temporal states. Okay, which in this context, I'm referring to things that begin to exist, things that depend upon something extraneous to themselves. Otherwise, you'll have to believe that one or more things are in and of themselves eternal, which you won't be able to account for. Okay? So, in order for there to be actual things with intelligibility, they will either necessarily indicate the eternal or not. Okay? Now, do you agree that there are temporal states?
Yes.
Okay. Do you
Does
Cut
Wi-Fi cut
out.
out?
I think we
I
lost
mean,
Darth.
look,
That was
this
divine
is
intervention if I've ever seen it.
absolutely
Wait,
begging the
who's
question.
the gay man who said the speed of light never changed? Many physicists think that the speed of light was faster during the early universe. Who's the gay man who said it's never changed?
Here we go.
Who's the gay man who said the speed of light has never changed?
Okay.
Many physicists, and I can post the
Divine
research papers here,
intervention.
think that it was faster at the early universe.
hello?
Did you know this?
Oh,
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Darth. Go ahead, Darth.
welcome back.
Okay. Okay. So either temporal and contingent states necessarily indicate the eternal or not. Okay. That or statement is a necessarily true statement. Do you want to dispute that?
I mean, I wouldn't take a stance on indicating the
No.
eternal
Listen
or
carefully.
not.
Either you're going to accept it or you won't accept it. The statement temporal states necessarily indicate the eternal or not. That or statement is a necessarily true statement because it's in the form of the law of excluded middle. In order
Sure.
to dispute that, you'd have to dispute the law of excluded middle.
Sure. So you're saying okay? So then my spaghetti could indicate eternal states or not.
You're not. This is going over your head. You're not understanding
This
this.
is an
Okay.
equal comparison. Like it either
This is
indicates it
going
or it
over your.
doesn't.
Listen
Like
to
I
me,
agree with your
Neon.
premise.
Neon. You're not
How
acting
are you going
like
to get
an
mad at
adult.
me? I'm
Okay.
agreeing with you, Darth.
Neon. Okay. Listen. Do you accept the or statement as necessarily true?
I tell you for the third time now. I agree with you.
I am dead.
Okay. It sounds like you're okay. Well, then you're going to have to object to the law of excluded middle. Are you prepared to do that?
What? Okay. I
Not
don't
you,
know if you're
Neon.
not hearing. I don't know if you're
Not
not
you,
hearing me.
Neon. Act like an adult, please. Okay. Now, the other gentleman who objected, are you prepared to refute the law of excluded middle?
I love the internet.
I don't know who
Oh,
you're
no.
talking to. Nobody else was talking.
Okay, so no, there was somebody else who objected. Okay, so if in the case that the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal, the temporal has grounds, metaphysical grounds for actuality and intelligibility due to the contextualization of and by the eternal. Okay, now you accept that, right?
No, I don't accept that things necessarily indicate the eternal. You would have
Oh,
to
okay.
substantiate that.
No. Listen carefully. Either it is the case that temporal states necessarily indicate the eternal or not. You're going to have to select one of those. I am presenting to you that because there are temporal states, the only way they could be temporal states is that they are contextualized metaphysically by the eternal. Without the contextualization of the eternal, then they wouldn't be anything in and of themselves.
Or they could not indicate the eternal, right?
Yeah, you're not getting this. See, this is the problem I have.
Dude,
This
the
is
word
not very
salad, I swear
complicated.
to God.
Yeah, you know what? Hey, Precept, would you please start server muting those people who are heckling and ankle biting? If you want to substantially disagree with me, step up to the plate.
Yeah,
But if
I'm
you're going to do
saying that,
drive
and I'm
by,
saying that
I couldn't hear
you're not
anyone. I was
making
on
the
the.
argument. You're not
okay,
making the argument that things
you're not.
necessarily indicate the eternal. How do they
No,
do
okay.
this, and why?
Okay, I just explained it to you, but it went
You
over your
did
head.
not.
I will go. Okay, listen, Neon, I'm really getting a little bit fed up with your immature response. I will explain it to you again. Okay, the instantiation that something is actual is going to have to be in virtue of its contextualization. Are all facts context specific?
You asking?
I'm waiting for an answer.
Sure.
Okay, so the actuality of a putative fact is context specific. So you're not going to be able to ground the actuality of something unless it is contextualized, either explicitly or implicitly. Okay? No contextualization, and you have no instantiation of actualization. Now, do you want to dispute that?
Can you define actualization?
Okay. I'm talking about that something is actual.
That doesn't define it any further.
Yeah, something is actual as if it's real.
Okay. So things
When
being
I say
real.
it is actual, okay, that temporal states are either actual or they're not, but then they wouldn't be
You're
temporal
saying that
states. They
temporal
wouldn't be.
states are either real or not.
If something is not actual, then it's not real. Okay, if a
Okay.
temporal state is real, in order to ground the actuality of something, it must be contextualized, either explicitly or implicitly.
Okay.
If
So
you have,
things that
if you
exist.
have,
So
if
things
you
that
have
exist
no,
must be real and contextualized.
in order for you to ground that something is real, it's going to have to be contextualized. You've already agreed to that. Now, if you attempt to contextualize anything apart from the eternal, you won't be able to.
Why?
Because only that which is without beginning, okay, can be the ultimate contextualization.
Okay.
If you say,
How does that
listen
necessitate God?
carefully. I'm trying, well, first of all, we haven't gotten to God yet.
Are we ever
Okay.
going to?
Okay. You know what? You have a bad attitude. And this whole time you've had a bad attitude, partly because you're uneducated and you don't understand what I'm presenting. And I've had to go over it multiple times. Okay. Now,
I think
my
have been
patience,
changing the
listen, Neon,
terminology of your argument to obfuscate
listen to
its
me.
meaning.
Okay, Neon, you are not as smart as you think you are. You're not as educated as you are. And what you don't understand, you sneer at, and you are not responding to me
That
like
is
an
the pot
adult.
calling the kettle black if I've
Okay,
ever heard it, my guy.
Precept, please mute Neon. We're done with him. He wants to behave like a little child. You're going to be treated like a child. I don't
Really?
mind people respectfully disagreeing with me like adults, okay? But you're not doing that, okay? So I will
Well,
continue with somebody else, okay?
he
I have a
never
question
insulted
for
you until
Darth.
you
Wait,
insulted
hold on a
him. You
second.
total
When you
speaking
act
time,
like
you
a
have
child,
80%.
okay, mute this person.
Really?
I have a question for Darth.
This is hold on a second. This is not a room for ankle biting or trolling or catcalling. If you want to disagree, you are going to do it in a mature adult fashion. Otherwise, you will get server muted. Okay? Now, there was somebody else who wanted to make an objection?
No.
No, not you, objects. Just wait a
Oh, okay.
second.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I present my line of reasoning, it's either people don't understand it or don't want to understand it. It's usually the latter. And then they just start quibbling. Okay? Without invoking that which is eternal, that which is without beginning, to contextualize those things that do begin, then what you're going to have to offer is either an infinite regress, which is simply untenable, undefendable, and it's not coherent. Okay? or you're going to have to say that temporal states come into existence for no real reason at all, which would mean they're not contextualized. Okay? So the only way to ultimately contextualize temporal states is by a reference to that which is eternal without beginning. Okay? Now, does anybody else have objections or questions? Okay, what did you want to say, objects?
So when you say actual, I understand that only because I believe in things like being, the eternal, things like this. Now, atheists have a very difficult time with concepts or facts like being or things like this and actual. And so when you're talking about actual, when I talk about it, it's sort of a metaphysical thing which can explain physical things and temporal events, right? The act of being can cause temporal events. In your experience, what do atheists consider actual? How do they define
Well,
actual as divergent from you?
well, they're usually materialist, okay, or physicalists, and so they believe in a world of monism, that there's just one world, okay, as opposed to, let's say, the creator creature distinction, where there's God and his creation. And they just believe that there is an innumerable or unimaginable number of particulars that just behave in a certain way where there are emergent properties. Okay, just this hierarchy or cascading emergent properties. That's why most of them will, stupidly invoke that what is fundamental to everything is just energy.
But when you define energy for them, it has to be a process in time, and then you have to ask them, where did that process begin?
Well, they don't care about their failure to account for their own metaphysic or model of reality. All they
Well,
care
they just
about
say it's
is
eternal
doing
or
the
something.
vast majority of them.
Yeah,
All they care about is having the interaction about the existence of God culminate in stagnation and a stalemate, which they consider victory.
Precept King
Okay?
is right. They appeal to eternalism, that energy just always was.
Well, first of all, there's a number of philosophical problems with this. First of all, how is that not an arbitrary statement on their part?
It is indeed.
Okay. Number two, they don't have a concrete universal. They're just appealing to a unimaginable or a myriad of discrete states. Okay. But that doesn't tell us that each discrete state is itself um, immutable in any respect, that it's invariant. Okay. So they're still dealing with a chance world. Okay. Now, because they're made in the image of God, they can't help but think in a manner that God ordained, that each of us think foundationally. But they don't want to attribute these fundamental parameters of existence by which we think, okay, to God. So their recourse is, well, that's just the way the world is. Okay. But when they invoke that, they're violating the very criterion of belief that they use to dismiss God, rendering their position irrational on their own terms. See, this is such a devastating point, they completely ignore it, that they're violating their own criterion of belief when they establish when they attempt to invoke or instantiate the not God world. But you see, they don't care, because most of them, including some of the professional philosophers, the atheists out there, they're well practiced at bickering and rabbit trailing. And this is what they do. When they're confronted with the pure arbitrariness of their system, they don't care. Their highest priority is to not acknowledge God as creator. That is what motivates all of their thinking and how they interact. They will represent themselves as just being champions of reason and truth, and that they're justifiably skeptical and they're just in a state of incredulity, and you just need to change their mind. But that's a misrepresentation of their position. They are smuggling in atheism without calling it atheism. And we can know this when we make a case for God and creation, they don't accept it. And then when we ask them to give an account of their position, they claim that we're shifting the burden of proof because they think that they're residing in a default position. Okay, but they're not.
When they say something like the world doesn't need a God, that would be like a metaphysical claim, right?
That is a recapitulation that God does not exist indirectly. It's an informal denial of God.
But would that fall under metaphysics? Like that'd be a part
Of course
the
it would.
Yeah.
If you say God is not needed, okay, that is an implicit, indirect, informal denial of God. If P, then Q. P, therefore Q. They are affirming a proposition that entails that God cannot logically coexist. Okay, that's why most atheists will not actually defend the universal negative that God does not exist. Always keep in mind that when we talk about God, we're talking about the creator-creature distinction, in that we have God who is eternal, and everything else is temporal, derives, and depends upon him. Okay? So when they reject the God world, they are rejecting the creator-creature distinction. So then typically they will be advancing some kind of naturalism. And then when you try to, dumb it down for them, they start nitpicking, they start rabbit trailing, they start becoming rude and obnoxious, like we just saw earlier. Okay. So I said the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal. Okay. Now they're smug and just think, well, I don't accept it. Oh, okay. So then the temporal states, which they consider to be actual, have no metaphysical contextualization. Because if the temporal don't ultimately indicate the eternal, then what foundationally contextualizes the temporal? What is it? And all they're left with is a world of brute facts, that there is no identifiable, defensible ground of all being that contextualizes any discrete state of affairs. Their attitude is smug, it's arrogant, it's defiant, and their attitude is, well, that's just the way the world is, and you have to it's your burden of proof to show otherwise.
And that they want to talk about their worldview. They just want to talk about our worldview, and then they borrow from our worldview.
Right.
It's
So
just interesting. Don't we think it's not a coincidence that when you're talking about things like the qualities of experience, consciousness, time, their physics just falls to pieces? I mean, there is a place for physics, obviously. It gives us the technological world. But when it comes to being, like I say,
they
the
don't
consciousness, it's all their physics isn't
they
able to
don't
go there.
have they don't have a metaphysic in order to ground physics. Okay. It doesn't matter that they have predictive success, even with 100% accuracy. Okay. When we talk about physics, they're simply talking about the laws of nature, the regularity of nature. Okay, good. Tell me what a law is. What is that?
Exactly.
What is a law? Well, what they might say is it is a recurrent event um, that has emergent properties that produces other regularities. Oh, okay. Has it always been recurrent in the past infinite? Did it begin to exist? Is there something that is imposing that regularity and sustaining it in regularity? Is it self-contained, unconditionally non-dependent, or are any of these laws themselves derivative and dependent? You see, they get very frustrated when this line of questioning is being presented because they can't answer it. And so what they can't answer, when they realize that their position is being shown to be utterly and completely absurd and arbitrary, then it's time for them to cheat. And that is to try to rabbit trail. They try to segue onto other semi-related topics. And typically what they do is they'll go, oh, well, you're shifting the burden of proof. Whenever you hear them say you're shifting the burden of proof after you have presented a case for God, whether or not that case for God is satisfactory, their position is not instantiated because they don't accept your reasoning. So, for example, Kai Nielsen, a atheist philosopher who wrote the Atheist entry in the Encyclopedia Britannica, stated in one of his books, and you can look this up, all of the reasons for God might fail, but it still might be the case that God exists. So their non-acceptance of rationales for God's existence does not ipso facto establish rationally the not God world. Now, I think it's very important that when we discuss these issues, when we talk about God, that we refer to it as the God world versus the not God world. Okay? Because then that makes the issue clear. When we talk about the God world, we're talking about the creator-creature distinction. Not merely that there's an unimaginable mind out there who's going to get you, an unimaginably powerful mind that's going to get you if you don't love him and say to him on Sunday morning. But what we're talking about is God being the ground. Yeah, what?
You're back now. You just cut out for a bit.
Okay. So what you will see routinely is the atheist, when an effective, simplified biblical presuppositional defense of the existence of God is presented, then they just play little children's games at the cafeteria table, and they're shameless about this. So the case for God, that God is the ground of the laws of logic, including everything else, is that the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal, and it could only do so if and only if the eternal was God and had the attributes to make the temporal indicate the eternal. Now, they have two options if they don't accept that. They're either going to have to accept that the temporal indicates the eternal, but that the eternal is not God, or they're going to have to take even a worse position that temporal things are not contextualized necessarily by the eternal. But then the temporal things wouldn't be anything at all, because there's nothing to contextualize them.
Is this sort of like the idea that for there to be cold, there needs to be hot to contextualize like what cold is? Is it kind of like that? Not really.
Well, I'm going to say tentatively no. Okay. What I'm saying is that you'll notice that when I said to that punk, are facts context specific? Well, he's not so stupid and uneducated where he was going to say no. So he agreed to it. But if facts are context specific, that means any fact of a temporal state would be specific to its context. That in order to instantiate a fact, it must be contextualized, either explicitly or implicitly. Now, we don't always discuss the contextualization because it's implicit.
Gives it meaning?
Well, it's not just meaning, it's why anything exists at all. Okay? So when I explain to them that when they reject that God is and that he's revealed himself in a rationally undeniable way in creation, which they sneer and scoff at, right? they've now placed themselves in a chance ultimacy. In other words, a chance ultimacy is a world where anything can be, anything can happen at any time, because there is nothing identifiable or defensible that singularly dictates all states of affairs. And at this point, they realize they're in deep doo-doo, but rather than realize the condition they're in, they will say, well, what dictates events is reality, which knows that they're totally clueless, out to lunch, and don't know what they're talking about. This is what T-Jump did, okay? Whenever they say reality, they don't realize they're invoking an abstraction and not a singular concrete. And by the way, if you want to know where I got the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal, it's a philosophical representation of Romans 1.
You say
You come up
atheism
with
is
that?
baseless, but I say it's pretty based. Why? You can't prove
I
God.
can't hear you.
He's
Your
not real.
microphone is very weak. You need to fix your microphone. Okay, what's your username?
Your mentality is pretty weak. That's why you look to an invisible spaghetti monster in the sky for guidance in your darkest of
Okay.
hours. And I look
Okay.
to myself. I look within. I gather strength from within. I don't need seek outward for
Okay,
higher power.
Albie, I'm going to ask you one question. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to have an
Okay.
adult conversation on this?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that.
Okay. Now I'm going to tell you right
How old
now.
are you?
If anyone else talks, you're going to get server muted. We don't tolerate ankle biters or drive-by hecklers. Now, Appleby, I'm just going to tell you this once. You're free to disagree with me, but you will agree or disagree with me in an adult manner. If you resort to obnoxious teenage behavior without further warning, you will be server muted. Do you understand?
That sounds pretty subjective, but okay, let's do
No,
it.
that's not okay. Listen, okay, so that's strike one right there. That's not subjective at all. I laid out for you an objective
I feel like
criterion.
I feel like I'm being an adult pointing that out.
Overtalk me again, and you're going to have another strike on you. And then if you get one more strike, you're going to be out.
Am I allowed to speak for a second?
No, you're not.
All right,
Okay,
well,
I can already
This
say
you're a
nigga is a
child.
controlling
You're a
prick.
now
child.
listen to me
You're a
carefully.
child, and you don't want to hear anyone else
Appleby,
speak, and you just want to have power.
Appleby, listen to me
That's cool.
carefully, okay?
If you don't want to talk my way and you don't want to follow my rules, you can't talk.
Mute him.
You can't talk.
Mute him. Good. Okay. So let nobody say that I didn't give him an opportunity, to listen. He's an arrogant little teenager who knows nothing. All he knows is the flying spaghetti monster routine. Okay. And you'll notice that he left instantly after muting. He's just a drive-by. Okay. Little drive-by teenager.
That was pretty obvious immediately. I think he made it known.
But you'll notice that he was a pathological liar because he agreed that he was going to conduct himself in an adult manner. And he didn't.
My audio cut out. Sometimes I have to like leave and rejoin because I lose audio. It's really, I don't know, it's like a bug or something.
Okay. So we defend God's existence by an appeal to God's revelatory action, whereby he discloses himself in and through creation. Now, we can do that through a philosophical representation of what God revealed. So in Romans 1, it says, ever since the beginning of the creation of the world, God's eternal powers, his divine nature, have been clearly seen in everything that has been made. Okay? So that means that the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal, and it could only do so if and only if the eternal was God. Now, if they refuse to accept that objective proof for God, then they have some explaining to do. They don't have the luxury of just crying that they're in a state of incredulity.
You come up with that argument, or did you get that from someone?
Well, what I learned from Van Til, from reading Van Til, and I still have a lot more to read about Van Til, is I noticed that with his great understanding of biblical theology and the depths of his philosophy, that he would extract certain philosophical analysis from the theological statements in Scripture. Okay? And so after I read Romans 1, I asked myself, how can this be represented, not altered, not changed, but how can it be represented in philosophical terms in a way that doesn't compromise the wording that Paul represents? Okay? So when he talks about ever since the beginning of the creation of the world, that represents temporal states. God's eternal powers and divine nature have been clearly seen through everything that has been made. In other words, temporal states. So that means that temporal states must be indicative of its context or the eternal. All right? Or not. Okay? So both the actuality and intelligibility for anything at all, unless you're God, must be contextualized. Okay? So if they reject the reasoning that the temporal necessarily indicates the eternal, and it could only do so if it was God, then they're going to have to explain to me what it is that is singularly eternal, that contextualizes all things that are not eternal, that are temporal. But you see, such an entity will be unidentifiable and indefensible. Okay. Now, if you get an unbeliever who's really an idiot and who is deceptive, they'll just make up something and just say, "Well, there's the eternal kerflunkel, and it made me to know that I exist." And they just start making up stuff that they don't even believe. Right? And you sit there and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead."
They call that like a mirror argument. They think it's like some valid.
It's a parody. No, it's a parody. They're doing a parody of the Christian worldview. So you say, explain to me the kerflunkel. Is the kerflunkel a mind, an agent? And they'll say, well, no. Say, explain to me how their kerflunkel, not being a mind, instantiated that the temporal indicate the eternal. How does that work?
I actually do that with the problem of evil. I kind of poke fun of it and I go, why did God make farts smell bad? Isn't it logically possible farts smell good? Why did he make the world like that if he's omnibenevolent?
Well, the reason why there's death and suffering after the perfect creation is because following rebellion, God has a plan of redemption. And the good, the bad, and the ugly, i.e. evil, is a part of God using these unpleasantries of life along with the good things of life as a constant reminder and motivator so that more people will repent in the course of human history rather than fewer. So you see, the presence of evil is not incompatible with God's benevolence. It is compatible with his benevolence in that he's implementing these unpleasantries to bring about the best of all possible worlds, which is to maximize the number of people who go unto eternity rightly related to him. So the real bottom line is that the unbeliever says that evil, death, and suffering is incompatible with the benevolence of God because it's not their plan. Okay? God has a different plan. And you'll notice that they won't even discuss God's plan of redemption. See, the Bible just doesn't say God is a maximally benevolent God. It talks about that God creates the world. He has a plan. And then upon the introduction of rebellion, God now has a plan of redemption. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying God was caught, off guard here. We know from eternity that God decided that Christ would die on the cross. But you see, the evil that's in the world, okay, is a part of a temporal judgment to bring about his plan of redemption. So evil, the presence of evil, is not incompatible with his plan of redemption. But they won't talk about that because they're uneducated and unsophisticated on it. Even PhD philosophers. You won't hear them really much talking about God's plan of redemption.
When the Garden of Eden, didn't he promise Eve like she will bear the fruit that like defeats the devil or something, like the snake? I think there's some promise God made to Eve like
No,
that.
he says her seed, you will bruise its heel, and he will crush your head. And the bruising, of course, is a foreshadowing of Christ dying on the cross. And Jesus' death on the cross was a forever shattering of the work of Satan. Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, and bringing about redemption, it forever destroyed the work of Satan. But have you noticed how many times when I'm dealing with unbelievers, how the overwhelming majority of time they resort to acting like little children at the cafeteria table?
To me too. That neon guy before you got here, he was just
Yeah.
like, as you said, cheating at Monopoly the whole time.
How about the guy that I talked to and I said to him at the outset, either you're going to conduct yourself in an adult manner or not. And if you don't, if you start bickering, you're going to be server muted. And so right after I laid out the ground rules, what does he decide to do? He starts to act like a little child at the cafeteria table.
Right when he joined, he talked about how you don't need God and like all you need is yourself, and that's just like this new age lie, and a lot of people believe in it.
It has no ultimate context. It's what they are saying is vacuous.
Yeah, but I mean, I found that out the hard way. Like I thought that way too, right? And then sometimes life hits you
Well,
really
what
hard,
they're
and you need
doing,
Jesus in
what
your
he's
life to
doing
help
is
you.
when they say this, they're very stupid. Okay, what they're really saying is, well, I don't have a positive attitude that God exists, and I'm getting along fine. But that's not what we're saying. We're not talking about that you just have to have a positive attitude that God exists. We're saying you must acknowledge that it is the case that in the grand scheme of things, God is the necessary precondition of what is, can be, and cannot be. And when you reject that, then there will be no contextualization. That's when Van Til says to the impossibility of the contrary. Okay? So when he says that the Christian worldview is exclusive and indispensable,
I think you cut out, Dart.
okay, so when he says when the Christian worldview is exclusive and indispensable,
But I was just trying
that
to make
was
the point. Like, I don't know. I think that's. I used
hello,
to have that attitude when I was
are you
younger. I
there?
think that's like a young attitude. To think you don't need God and stuff.
How about now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so when Van Til argues that the Christian worldview, in its composite message, presents itself as being exclusive and indispensable. In other words, there is no other worldview that has its base attribute set, and you can't do without it metaphysically. Therefore, it results in a reductio ad absurdum. Okay, that they won't be able to instantiate the actuality of an alternative metaphysic, and they don't care. All they care about is bullshitting. That's why it's very hard to find very serious-minded, mature adult atheists to talk to. They thrive on ridicule and sarcasm, or when they do their YouTube shows, where when people call in, they're just railroaded and then quickly eliminated. Imagine if I were to call in to Matt Dillabloviator, how I would be treated if I called in. For those of us who know the great Dillabloviator, I think we could predict with total accuracy how I would be treated.
Yeah, that show is like a farce. What is an atheist experience? It should be the atheist non-experience.
I call it the atheist schmerience. But he doesn't do that anymore because he defected from the Atheist Experience, ACA.
No, I think he went back now. I heard he went back, I think.
He's back at the ACA?
I could be wrong. I thought I heard that when he was
I
talking to Jay.
I haven't heard. I've heard that, but I'm
But,
kind of
like,
glad. I'm kind of glad. Well, I don't know that he's back there, but I'm glad I had a part in his departure from the ACA. It gives me some satisfaction, which I won't go into further detail.
He shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. Talking about Dillahunty.
Just to show you very quickly how stupid his position is, he keeps on saying, well, you haven't demonstrated your position. You haven't demonstrated your position. How is the not God world demonstrated?
Were you going to bring up his tranny girlfriend?
Well, I want to correct you that that's not a girl. That's a dude pretending to be a female.
I said girlfriend. That's what he calls her.
No. Has he done so recently? Is he still in that relationship?
I have no idea. I was asking if that's what he was trying to remember about Matt Dillahunty.
I didn't understand what you said.
I was
thinking
of how I think it's funny they call it the Atheist Experience because you can't experience atheism. You'd have to like go to heaven and check to make sure God's not there to experience atheism. But people experience theism all the time. Like people have there's the prophets and encounters with God and visions and
knowing God's existence is unmistakable and rationally undeniable. Notice how I add that qualifier, okay? Knowing God is rationally undeniable, but you can irrationally deny God. Have you noticed that it's always the same talking points, the same non sequiturs?
Hey, before I forget though, is that against TOS what I said?
I didn't hear the last part of that.
Yeah.
Yes, did you say the T word? I don't remember.
Yeah. I shouldn't say that one, right?
What's the T word?
Trans.
Trans.
Well, I just refer to them what they are, transvestites.
I think that word's okay. I'm not sure. Like it changes all the time. It's hard to keep up.
What do you mean okay?
Well, I'm trying not to use it as a slur.
Well, the thought police and the woke mafia don't want you to say the word tran-e.
Right. And I don't even see why that's offensive. I don't get it, but
it's because the woke community demands that it be offensive.
Paul says like don't be conformed by the standards of the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. I probably messed it up a bit, but something like that.
Don't you love it when that young skull full of mush came in here before and he tried the flying spaghetti monster routine? I mean, how dumb can you be?
You know, like when I was a kid, Darth, the F word was, fuck, right? But now it's the F slur, or for gay people slur. That's now the
F word.
Hey, Precept King, do you want to hear something funny? So I was just talking to Grizzly Gorilla, and he hit me with this absolute banger of a fucking meme. He said, Jesus believed that the earth was flat, therefore I need to believe it's flat too, if I want to be a Christian.
He actually said that to you?
He said that verbatim.
Okay,
he's not a Christian though.
So Grizzly Gorilla came and he apologized to me a couple of years ago because he was super trolling me and giving out information which he thought was mine. Okay, but so I guess he's still trolling. Yeah. Well, don't waste your time talking with him. Just write him off. Don't talk.
Man,
yeah,
I feel bad.
Why I'm here.
If they give out information and the guy's not you, like he must get harassed a lot. Just some random guy's getting harassed because these people putting out fake information.
I have a question for you, Darth.
I'm listening.
So, have you ever heard of Russell's Teapot?
No, I've never heard of that.
I figured you did. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, because I heard it in a conversation a couple days
Well,
ago.
first of all, I always like to give credit where credit due. Bertrand Russell was a brilliant man, both mathematically and philosophically. But his teapot was just utter foolishness. Okay, he's talking about. I'm trying to remember. Was it a visible or an invisible? Did he say it was an invisible teapot orbiting what planet?
Was it invisible? Yeah, I don't know. It was orbiting the
Yeah,
sun.
something like that. Okay. So the point is, this is a claim, therefore, that nothing directly or indirectly indicates God. But did he defend that? No, he didn't. What he's doing is he's positing God as the ground of all being, who would, by definition, not be a material entity, but who might choose to manifest himself in some way physically, right? He's treating God as though he were like Martians or the Loch Ness monster or Bigfoot. Okay, and then says, because we don't have anything to confirm it there, then we're justified in saying that it's not there. It's not. It's like Anthony Flews the presumption of atheism. Okay, like what Christopher Hitchens said in the debate with William Lane Craig, that since there is no evidence for God, then we should be bold enough to say, therefore, God does not exist. Right?
I saw. I remember reading. What do they call, like, a counter argument to the teapot, saying in the teapot scenario, the idea is like we don't have evidence for this teapot, therefore we shouldn't like believe or disbelieve in it. And the counterclaim was like, well, we would have evidence because teapots are man-made, and it would require like a space agency to launch this teapot out into space, and
It's
it's
a
expensive. And
it's a
so,
pathetic line of reasoning for such a
yeah,
brilliant philosopher as Bertrand Russell. Okay, because it's really mischaracterizing the situation. And again, Russell himself was smuggling in atheism. Okay, the smuggling in of atheism is to say, well, we have this natural world, we both agree, but you want to say there's God. God is this supernatural overlay. So we both agree the natural world exists, but you have to show the supernatural. That's the line of reasoning that I've just given is smuggling in atheism, because the natural world will either be presented with reference to the necessity of God or without. Just saying that the natural world just simply is without referencing God is to present a kind of naturalism or materialism, which is atheist. It's a kind of covert atheism.
So is it
Remember,
the fact that the teapot is like inconsequential, like nothing depends on the teapot's existence?
well, what Russell is saying is there's nothing to indicate that the teapot is there, right?
Right.
But that's analogous to saying that the world, everything in the world that we come into contact with, does not indicate the creator directly or indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something that he can defend.
Oh, I see.
Okay. What Russell is advancing is a kind of that atheism is simply a state of incredulity, right? That atheism is just the rejection of the God claim, right? But that's not what atheism is. Now, I should qualify that by saying atheists who outright deny the existence of God do reject the God claim, but atheism is not a mere non-acceptance of the God world. Okay? That's why they'll sit there and just say, well, I'm just unconvinced. Well, that's non-informative, because you see, agnostics say they're not convinced and they claim that they're suspending judgment. Atheists who deny the existence of God are also not convinced by virtue of the fact that they deny the existence of God. Okay? Merely saying that you're in a state of incredulity, it doesn't follow from that God doesn't exist.
Do you find it odd that atheists think that science proves atheism? They always link the two, that, oh, science works, physics works, therefore atheism.
Well, they're very people who talk like that and think like that, even though they may be educated in other areas, are very stupid philosophically or metaphysically. Victor Stenger, the late Victor Stenger, did that. He held that science demonstrates that God doesn't exist. I don't recall what the title of his book is at the moment. Maybe somebody can look that up. But Victor Stenger was very smart when it came to the sciences and physics. But a lot of times these physics wonks step into areas that they're not properly prepared for, philosophically. And I don't mean formally, right? Look at Lawrence Krauss. The guy is an atheist firebrand. He's debated for atheism. And when I just simply say, oh, how is it that God doesn't exist? That's all I said to him. All of a sudden he goes, well, I'm not saying that there couldn't be a guiding intelligence. I'm just saying the ones so far aren't credible, that they don't exist. So what he does is he baits and switch from global atheism to local atheism. Okay? Now, do you think when he's among his own fellow atheists that he's claiming he's an agnostic? That he's just in a state of incredulity? He's not sure one way or the other? He categorically said, we don't need God. And if you make that assertion, that is an indirect, implicit denial of the existence of God. It's an informal denial. But when I asked him to give me the rationale why God doesn't exist, he folded and he baited and switched.
Who are we talking about?
Lawrence Krauss, the atheist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he does the typical dance.
And it's funny, William Lane Craig debated him, I think, in Australia on 3 separate nights. And Krauss acted like a complete horse's ass, and Craig let him get away with it,
Yeah, one of those debates, he was like out of control.
You know what? You could have just, if Craig's not a biblical presuppositionalist, okay? He's more of a classical or evidentialist, okay? And Craig's position is not that it's objectively provable that God exists, like Van Til says. Craig's position is that God is the best explanation of why anything exists, or God is the most probable explanation. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, Krauss just has to just sit there and just verbally throw up your hands and just say, I don't agree. Craig could have hit him with certain biblical lines of reasoning that result in a reductio ad absurdum, but Craig won't. Okay?
But doesn't Craig say that the ontological argument means that, like, if it's even possible that God exists, then he must exist?
Well, that's if you follow the first premise, the so-called subsequent premises would necessarily follow. But here's the problem, okay? When you talk about God possibly existing, right? Are we talking ontologically or epistemologically?
I think ontologically.
Okay, well then, but you see, God's existence is necessary, right? It's not a contingency. So if I said to you right now, it's possible there's a deer in my backyard, okay? Where I live, there's deer, okay? So there's a certain, the deer could move around and there could be a deer in my backyard. Now, if I said to you, there's a possibility there's a kangaroo in my backyard, well, that's a much lower probability or possibility because I'm in America. And how many kangaroos that are not in zoos are roaming freely? Okay. But you see, both of those probabilistic states are subject to background information. Okay. God's existence, how is it derived or subject to background information? It isn't.
The background information that like something exists, like
No. A statement of probability. See, Craig himself said probabilistic pronouncements are subject to background information in terms of what is static and dynamic, or what is fundamentally regular alongside what is irregular. Okay? So God's existence is not a variable within a greater realm of what is static and not static. Okay?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so for example, a deer being in my backyard, we have static information. There's the earth, there's, United States, my state, my town, my backyard. And then we have the existence of deers. That's a variable. Deer are not everywhere, they're only in certain places. So now we have what is static and dynamic in order to make an assessment if there's probably a deer in my backyard. So I think we would all agree that the possibility of a deer being in my backyard, given my location, is vastly higher than a koala being in my backyard. Well, how did I come up with those possibilities? Because of the background information of what is static and dynamic or irregular. God's existence isn't subject to background information.
Yeah. No, that's true. I wonder, can you try to get out of that by saying like the probability calculus like only applies metaphysically to like the physical world and it wouldn't apply to God?
I would say that probabilistic assessments can only be given our understanding of the background information of what is static and dynamic. Okay?
Yeah.
Right? And that it just, I just think it's a category error. Okay? Right. I would be curious to see what Alvin Plantinga would say about that, because he's somebody who has promoted, that ontological argument.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He might surprise me because the guy's brilliant.
Yep.
But, as brilliant as he is, he's not reasoning. Let's put it this way. Sometimes Christians who are philosophers, some of them will reason more biblical than others. And I think that Van Til's reasoning is more biblical than Plantinga's. Not in any way to diminish Plantinga's brilliance.
Yeah.
Even Plantinga misunderstood some of Van Til's ideas. Okay, because if you don't hold to a biblical presuppositional metaphysic, okay, then to the degree that you don't hold to it, you're prone to at least misunderstanding it in part. Now, that's not to say that there are people who argue against it, like people who are experts on apologetics out there don't have a good understanding of it. But it's very common for biblical presuppositionalism not to be properly understood, not because it's hard to understand, but because you have to shake off a lot of worldly thinking. Okay?
And a lot of good reasoning.
What's that?
You have to take out a lot of good reasoning to understand it.
I didn't get what you said.
It's like Swiss cheese, man. So many holes in it.
What are you talking about?
presuppositional apologetics.
Can you get closer to your microphone? Because I'm trying to understand you.
This is a troll from yesterday. He's saying that presuppositional apologetics is illogical.
Okay, what's your username so I know who I'm talking to?
It's Luthero. Remember him?
He's the gay German man.
Okay, Luthero. Okay, give me your critique.
My critique is the special.
Get closer to
Use
your
yesterday
microphone.
to justify your view.
Did you hear me?
You remember when you yesterday invented this
Okay,
new law
did
of
you
logic
hear me
that
when
only
I said
applies to God?
yeah, dude, get closer to your microphone source, please.
Or why don't you turn up the volume?
He sounds
The
fine to
volume is not the problem. It's that you're very echoey.
Well, I'm sorry for that, Lordship. There's nothing I can do about it.
Well, then the moment I can understand you, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat. So go ahead.
Luthero, state your main point.
My point is that, and I still don't understand it unless you create, as you did yesterday, this new law of logic, which only applies to this God concept, you know?
I don't have the
Do not.
foggiest idea
Oh,
what you're talking about.
you don't know? Well,
No, you're not making sense.
you remember I asked you, when I do not hold the belief in God's existence to be true, why do I therefore believe that God does not exist? You said
Oh,
because
okay.
of logic, yeah?
Yeah,
And
I'll
there is no
explain it to
logic
you.
pointing out to that.
I will explain it to you again. Okay. The denial of something can be formal or informal. The denial of something can be explicit or implicit. The denial of something can be direct or indirect. Now, do you accept what I just said?
Man, shut the fuck up.
Okay. Lutheran?
What could you apply it to, let's say, ice cream? To hold the belief that ice cream exists
Okay,
and
you
to
are
not hold the
ignoring
belief.
what I just said. You're doing what you did yesterday. I asked you a direct question. Can a denial be informal rather than formal?
I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. I think it's
You don't know
irrelevant.
the difference between formal and informal?
In this case, when we're talking about logic and holding beliefs,
Sir,
I don't
listen to
think
me.
this is relevant.
You know what? You are on the fast track to getting server muted. You are doing what you did yesterday. Every time I ask you a direct question, you are completely evasive. So if you don't want to get server muted, then you need to stop being evasive.
You're threatening your interlocutor. Is this your debating technique?
Have a nice day. Mute them. We're done with them. We're done. Okay. Okay. We're done. Okay.
Does this every time.
Once I bend over backwards and I'm trying to very politely and patiently encourage you to bring your position in an adult manner, and then I respond to you and I greatly simplify it and ask, "Do you accept that?" And then you just start rambling about something related, and you are prevaricating. You're pretending to respond what I said to you, but you're not. You're segueing down a semi-related rabbit trail, and it's on purpose. You did this yesterday, and you did it multiple times today, and you were warned several times, and then you did it again. So you're done. Okay? I asked him a very simple question. Can a denial be either formal or informal? Can a denial be explicit or implicit? Can a denial be direct or indirect? Well, the answer is yes to all three of those. The atheists think that the only way to deny God is formally. They think that the only way to deny God is directly. They think the only way to deny God is explicitly. Well, that's wrong. You can deny God informally, you can deny him indirectly, and you can deny him implicitly. I just no longer have patience when somebody makes it abundantly clear to me that when I simply put a simple proposition on the table for them to accept or reject, and then they just start talking about something semi-related, and they repeatedly do it. Okay?
They rarely directly answer questions. They always do this crap.
And then they'll go, oh, there's Darth with his script again. There's Darth with his dialogue tree. The mistake that they're making is that you can withhold positive belief that something is the case without it being a denial. Okay? That's true for many things, but it's not true for God. Okay? Why? It's because God is not simply an unimaginably powerful, unembodied mind. Okay? What we're talking about is the creator creature distinction, that the world only comes into existence by God and it is sustained by God. So if you choose to refrain from a positive belief or accept that God is, then by default you will believe in a world that exists with metaphysical independence from God, even though you say, but I'm not denying God's existence. And if you want to hear a really good analysis on this, you can read Van Til's book on epistemology, where he just rips to smithereens agnosticism. Let me see if I can find the title of that book.
Yeah. When was Van Til, when did he do his work?
It was like 100 years
Van
ago.
Til died, I think, uh, in the it's either 80s or 90s. I think Bonson died in the 90s. I think Van Til died in like 1986 or 85.
Oh,
And
wow.
he taught for almost all of his career at Westminster Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania.
Bonson dead?
No, Bonson, they were considering Bonson, but because of some of his other theological views, they felt was incompatible with the seminary. Like he was Bonson was a theonomist, and the leadership at Westminster, although they're Calvinists like Bonson, they were not theonomists.
It's a theonomist.
Theonomist is somebody who believes that the civil statutes are universally required upon all mankind.
Kind of like a Messianic Jew or something.
No. So, for example, a theonomist will say that the ceremonial laws were fulfilled in Christ, and that we are required to abide in principle, not for salvation, but in principle, the civil laws that God gave to the nation of Israel. it's a tall order to establish the universal negative atheism. So they've bastardized the meaning of atheism to merely just a state of incredulity, like the agnostic. Or like I should say, the agnostic is not merely in a state of incredulity. An agnostic is an atheist, but it's an atheist who thinks they're not an atheist.
Yeah.
But many atheists that you will encounter, a good many of them, are purposely trying to redefine atheism as though they had the agnostic mentality while not claiming to be agnostic. They're calling themselves an atheist for a reason, because they could just as easily lay hold to the agnostic label, but they don't. And then you get the really stupid atheists who say, "I'm an agnostic atheist."
I pretty much group deist people in with them too, because to me, like, there's no difference really, deist to atheist.
Well, I would be careful. I know what you mean by that, but
Yeah,
what you mean
I mean, they
could
have
be
like a
mis.
similar mentality.
What I would say is that deism is every much as worthless as atheism, because in deism there is no identifiable and defensible creator to put on the table.
Sometimes these atheists, they realize, like, yeah, like defending atheism is a fool's errand, so then they switch to deism.
Because it's not a personal God, right? In deism?
It's a similar, yeah, it's
Yeah,
basically
so
the same.
they get their cake and eat it too. So now they acknowledge God, but it's a God who's not going to judge them.
Who's making all that noise? Precept, could you mute Mr. Straight? Oh, never mind. Sounds like he quiet it down.
Isn't it amazing that we get these little drive-by little teenage schmucks coming in here, and you ask them at the get-go, "Okay, let's duke it out here, but we're going to be adults," and then they commit to being adults, and then it takes them less than 60 seconds to display their 14-year-oldness.
This is Discord after all.
Sometimes it's hard for me to see who's making noise when there's a bunch of people in the room.
Fair enough.
I really wish they would make them mobile apps for you.
I find it's easier on mobile to actually like see the people that are making noise.
Yeah, but you have to scroll up and down.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just because like my eyes are a lot more. I don't know, like I have laser eyes or whatever. Like I could notice like fucking like a bug in the corner of the room.
So it's amazing, they just give these cliches, these slogans for atheism, and they think that this is solid, metaphysics. It's not.
Yeah. I think some of them, like, the ones I've noticed are like the former, like, Mormons, like, who realized, like, they were lied to. They, they, I think they carry the resentment of being deceived, and then it's like they just default into calling themselves atheists because,
Well, it's like just because Mormonism is crack pottery doesn't mean that God doesn't exist.
Crack pottery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's old school. When you say somebody's crazy, you call them a crackpot.
Oh yeah. Could you mute Mr. Straight?
He keeps joining. What was his name?
Mr. Straight. He's got a gerbil for his profile picture.
Just imagine if there was a level playing field and Matt Dillabloviator had to answer my questions. Wouldn't that be a glorious thing to witness? Here's an example. One of his underlings, Shannon Q. Ducklips, when I encountered her like 2 years ago on Modern Day Debate, and she was given the opportunity to question me on my Christian theism, and I transparently answered all of her questions. But when it was my turn to ask her questions, she went into a complete troll mode. Right? Yeah.
she wouldn't answer, right?
Well, have you seen the video?
Yeah, I did. It was a lot. I saw it like, last year or something, so I don't really.
Well, you know what's funny is there are people who watch it and come back and saying, "Wow, you were right. She was a complete train wreck. And then other people, like the atheists, will say, boy, she destroyed Darth Dawkins. No, she acted like a complete horse's ass. But then again, that's what they think is intellectual.
Yeah, yeah, they go into like kind of like skirt mode where it's like an invasive technique.
Is that
I
Shannon
kind of
Key?
rank like I don't
Talking
know
about
Shannon in the ranks of like John Lee because I don't really take them seriously. Like anything that like John says, I don't know. I just have like trouble accepting that's what he actually believes. If you kind of get what I mean.
I haven't watched that, Darth. Did all she do is like psychoanalyze you, pretty much? Is that all? That's what I figured it was just gonna be.
I think that's mainly how it went. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like she just wasn't answering. Like she was kind of just kind of skirting around, like without giving like, you know, like answers and kind of being like, I don't know, and just like stuff like that.
Well, you're putting it mildly. That's like saying that Ted Bundy was rude to women when he was a serial killer.
I think a more apt one would be Jack the Ripper.
She was a complete fake. There were numerous times where she was fake laughing, and rather than answer the question, she was doing her little psychoanalysis of me. Oh, I see what you're doing. It was
Oh yeah, that's right.
it was one of the worst acting jobs I've ever seen. Right, and I said to her at the end of the interaction, I said, your performance was a complete train wreck here tonight. Have you no shame? And she doesn't. And just like the other atheists, they don't have any shame when they're behaving badly.
Yeah,
This
I
is
think because
Discord. I will say again. For them. There's no repercussions here. They could
no,
log
it
off
wasn't on
really fast and
Discord.
delete their account and nothing would change, right?
The thing with that though, Shannon, she was like someone canceled, right? So she was like a replacement at the last minute. So I don't think there's ever gonna be serious. Like,
Yeah.
Look, she's familiar with me, and she till this day she's still appearing on the atheist talking head shows as though she's competent. Okay, well, let's see how competent is where she's held accountable to answer the questions that are actually put to her, where she can't be evasive and do her her theatrics, which what she was doing. She was doing complete theatrics. Okay.
Theater.
Yeah, that was
well,
pathetic. I remember that.
Well, when I
she's not.
confronted her, what's your rationale that God doesn't exist? Magically, she turns into what she calls a temporal agnostic, right? Then a year
Yeah.
later, he stated while on friendly territory with dumb Derek from Mythvision that she was a categorically positive atheist. Okay. Then when Tonlock called in weeks later, and he said, on that show on Mythvision, you stated that you're a positive atheist. So how is it that God doesn't exist? So what does she do? She reaches into her little canvas tote bag from American Atheist with her little verbal bag of tricks. And she said, you ready for this? And she says to Tom, like when he asks her, how is it that God doesn't exist? Based upon what she previously said a couple of weeks earlier on Dumb Derek's Mythvision, she says, what do you mean by God?
Oh, man.
Okay. And what this is a complete diversionary tactic in order to stagnate or derail her being questioned on that point. Well, after Tonlock got done defining God, she then accused him of defining God into existence, something he wasn't doing. And then he finally got around to saying, okay, how does it that God doesn't exist? And immediately again, being afraid to actually defend herself because what do you mean by God?
Yeah. No, you're right. I think actually I think she likes to take the position that it's impossible for God to exist.
Look, I'm not trying to be mean. She's not the sharpest tack in the box. She couldn't defend that. Let her try. Let her try and say that in front of me and see how far that gets.
She
Darth,
says like
I
In
have
a
to ask
moderate,
you.
in a moderated discussion where he's required to answer the question.
Darth, did
she's
you
not
see
really
the
a
interview
she,
between Donald Trump
yo,
and what was
bro.
it?
Can I talk? Hello.
Sorry, go ahead.
She's not really like a philosophical person. She's more like she just wants to psychoanalyze.
No,
Like she's got a psychology degree or something, right?
no. But she's one of the more haughty atheists.
She just goes on those shows to be a pretty face or something.
Well, why do you think I call her Shannon Q Duck Lips? Okay. Okay, let's see if anybody who's familiar with her, do you know why I call her Shannon Q Duck Lips?
Does she like to powder lips or something?
That's exactly right. She's constantly taking um, publicity stills of her for YouTube where she's puckering her lips like she's Kim Kardashian in a photo set session. Okay.
Darth, did
Yeah,
you
those
see
pictures
that
look
interview
bad.
with Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump? Did you see
Yeah.
that?
I saw a chunk of it. Yeah.
Did you see the part where Donald Trump says that Kamala Harris speaks in rhyme?
I thought that was fantastic. I was slapping my knee the whole time. You know,
The
he was
bus
just
goes here and the bus goes there because that's what
yeah,
buses
yeah.
do.
Can you imagine what Donald Trump says in
Was
private
classic.
about her?
Oh my god. Oh man,
Oh
and
man, that's
the
funny.
best part is that that's such a correct, like that's just so accurate to how she acts.
That was a mild criticism. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what atheists do for the most part is they play games when you try to. Uh, they just play the contrarian game. Oh golly shucks, I'm just in a state of incredulity. You know, you're shifting the burden of proof. There's no evidence for God, and then when you ask him to defend that, then all of a sudden you hear silence. Right? You know, like
Yeah.
somebody said to me yesterday, the day before, there's no evidence for God. And I say, oh, okay. So temporal things don't necessarily indicate the eternal? And they're like, you see, they don't have a follow up cliche. So they don't know what to say. If nothing is evidence of God, okay, then the temporal things don't indicate the eternal. But then,
I think those atheist call-in shows are so obviously like fake.
I don't know
well,
why they just don't say that they just think there's more evidence on the non-god, view. And
no, they
that's why they
don't.
won't.
They don't have a non cliched, um, cogent rationale for the universal negative that atheism is. Okay, let's put it this way. When we talk about God existing, that represents the creator-creature distinction. There's God, and then there is the natural world. Everything within the natural realm universally derives and depends upon God. Okay? So when that is rejected, there
I lost audio.
We did. I can't tell if it's me or Darth.
You already know it's Darth. He's dropped off a few times, you idiots. Do the math.
Yeah, my audio keeps cutting out too.
Oh,
So
okay.
I didn't know that.
Anyway, when Darth is away, I'm in charge here. I do run my rooms with a very iron fist, so I don't allow my chatters to disobey me.
I talked to a couple atheists before Darth got here, and it's just like the same old shit. They don't like answer your question. They just talk about something semi-related and stuff, and it's just kind of annoying that they just constantly bullshit. Like,
Same old bullshit. They've been doing it literally for thousands of years.
Like, I'll make an effort. They'll ask really tough questions. I'll say, well, maybe I can't answer that question, or um, I'll try to answer every question. But man, I ask a question and like they just don't give a shit about answering my question.
Yeah, they lose their mind when you talk about timelessness. They
Yeah,
lose
like
their mind when you talk about consciousness. They lose their mind when you talk about the qualities of the world. All of that, they just spurg out and say it's physics. It's the brain. That's the whole story.
oh, you mean like for a subject like their response to like Precept?
Well, no, that's Precept King's and Darth's domain. But whenever the topic of consciousness comes up, they lose their fucking mind. They just start talking about the brain is
Oh yeah.
the brain is consciousness. The brain's the only real thing that exists, and consciousness emerges. And then the qualities of perception, those are just illusions.
Well, you know what they're doing? It's question begging. I mean, they're just reasoning backwards, like assuming that physicalism is true, that like it has to be the brain because like what else could it be?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
right.
It has to be in space. The conclusion
Yeah.
I've come to is that if it's in space, it's real for them. Anything that's not in space, i.e., things that are timeless, things that are non-spatial, they don't really exist.
So when it comes to consciousness, what else could it be?
It could be non-physical.
What does that
Well, I
mean?
mean, well, we already know that we have a pretty good reason to think that non-physical reality exists, such as 2 + 2 = 4.
No, I was talking
It
about
doesn't exist in a spatial way, but it has an existence in an abstract, conceptual way.
so what's driving consciousness then?
Well, consciousness is associated with the brain, but to call consciousness the brain per se is to make the category error.
Okay.
And
What else
Yeah,
is
like a
there?
consciousness could be fundamental and it can impose itself onto the brain. Like it could
Okay,
impose
exactly.
it.
So this is
go
what an
ahead.
idealist would believe. They believe, first of all, let me just set the groundwork. The that consciousness, according to idealism, I'm not saying I am one. Their argument is that that's the bedrock of reality because it's the one thing that can't be denied. This is the cogito, which we have problems with, right? But let's just say, for a hypothetical sake. Now, then we invent a new category called matter, and we try to reduce consciousness to that matter, to that thing that which is definitionally not conscious. This is an epistemological problem. It's a contradiction. It's an internal inconsistency, which is why the hard problem exists today. Because when you try, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what he was saying is that maybe it's the case that consciousness is first, and in this material reality in which we find ourselves, it's associated with the material brain. But to say it is the material brain is to say that consciousness is only a bottom-up process. And if that were the case, you could have no top-down effects on the brain, which are found. We do have top-down effects on the brain. The way you think changes the way your brain is shaped. And it goes the other way as well. Get a head injury and it will change the way you perceive reality. So there's this trade-off that is undeniable.
So basically, consciousness is not a physical thing. It can't be reduced to the physical realm. And so if you deny God and say like everything is just like matter, you have no basis for their consciousness even existing in your worldview. Like it
And
doesn't exist.
not only consciousness, but the qualities of objects outside of your consciousness are
You
not
guys got a lot of
reducible.
knots, but you didn't answer my simple question, which you guys claim to keep doing. What else is there, and where is it?
Well, I mean,
I did answer
you
you.
can't say where if something's non-spatial. There is no where. You could say it's
Hey, you
perhaps.
guys want to watch me do some drugs or what?
Okay, so how does it attach itself to you then? Whatever
Well,
this
I
thing
mean,
is.
you're asking me to answer a Nobel Prize winning question. This is the hard problem. It doesn't attach itself.
Oh,
It's sort of like,
oh,
here's the question you're asking. Why is it
so
that,
many drugs right now.
hold on, let me mute this guy. So here, it would be like asking, how can you have,
Are you guys trying to watch me do drugs or not?
how can you have, for example,
How can we have this? How is this happening? Who's letting this happen?
All
Why?
right, sorry, I had to get rid
Can
of
we
him.
can we server mute Wed, please?
Yeah, I tried to kick him, but it was like, I think I typed in the wrong name. Whoops.
To answer your question, I would appeal to vertical causation, which is a causation that's outside of time that causes temporal effects. You can find evidence in this from the quote "spooky action at a distance" that was given a Nobel Prize for just in October, and you also find it, I think, between consciousness and the material brain, that the connection from potential to act is an ontological transition. It's not one found in physics. Therefore, when you try to answer these questions on the basis of physics, you have in quantum mechanics the measurement problem, and in consciousness you have the hard problem.
Yeah, but atemporal causation is a problem. Okay.
Well, I was going to say, like, I think any type of causation, like, we don't really know, like, what is happening, like, to like, how does causation, like, substantiate itself? We don't really know, right? So
In the
I don't
inst-
even.
yeah.
Well, we know that God is the imposer of the causal principle.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, but this notion of atemporal cause is problematic. Okay, so the way to resolve it is that God Himself, in His life before creation, represents the first moment. It's a moment that doesn't begin to exist. And so from that first moment, the life of God, all subsequent moments come into existence. Problem solved. If you want to read a great book on it, it's called The End of the Timeless God by R.T. Mullins.
Yeah, R.T. Mullins is awesome.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with all of his theology, but I enjoy listening to his interviews.
Yeah.
And he really knows his stuff when it comes to the subject of the various views on the nature of time. You can read a couple of his papers called The Divine Time Maker and the Divine Watchmaker, which are just superb papers on the nature of time having to do with God. See, the thing is, some of the great theologians argued that God was atemporal. And the reason why they did so is because, out of sincerity, they didn't want to compromise God's exclusiveness and say that there was some realm that either coexisted or encapsulated God. So they then concluded that God created time. What they got wrong is that God created the realm of time which are all the subsequent moments to his own eternal life, but that his own life represents the first moment. And so that solves the problem of atemporality, and also solves the problem that time would either coexist with God in eternity or that it would be a realm that he would exist within.
So wait, what was it again? What was the first moment? Like,
okay, I'm just going to give you just a brief rundown on this. Okay, none of these ideas are original to myself. This is all from R.T. Mullins. A moment is defined as the way things are, but could subsequently be different. Okay, so all that you need in order for time to exist is a first moment. But the first moment need not have a beginning, right? So it will be a moment that doesn't begin to exist, right? His rationale is that time is a natured entity that is the ontological basis for all moments. So that the life of God before creation represents the first moment, the ontological basis of all moments, including himself. But the moment of his life doesn't begin to exist, nor does it have a metric. But with creation, God has created a chain of subsequent moments, including within which those moments have a metric, such as the Earth rotating on its axis.
So basically, really the only thing that changed was the metric was added in, almost.
Yeah, sometimes people conflate the metric with time itself.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's say hypothetically that God's life representing the first moment, he creates a subsequent moment that doesn't have a metric. Okay. But he has included metrics such as, the Earth rotating on its axis. Once you understand it, it's very simple. And you're like, wow, why didn't great minds think of that before?
Yeah.
William Lane Craig has spent a lot of time specializing in time, and he tried to solve the problem by saying that God is atemporal, sans creation, but with creation he becomes temporal. And R.T. Mullins takes issue with that, saying if time, okay, so let me just back a little bit. R.T. Mullins says there are different views on time. Okay, one of them is the relational view of time, which is time is the relationship between events. Okay, so you have event A and B, therefore you have a relationship. Okay, so people think that if you don't have change, then you won't have a relationship between events, and then there won't be time. Okay. So then, if you say that God causes things atemporally, it produces an incoherency because now there's change before the second event. In other words, God brings about or cause. I should say, no, not cause. What you would have is God deciding to create and acting, bringing into existence something else, so that they're just it's a problem philosophically. R.T. Mullins is much more eloquent in expressing than I am the incoherency, and he defends it superbly. And so that's why the title of his book, his doctoral dissertation, is "The End of the Timeless God." In other words, God is not timeless; God is temporal. But that doesn't mean that he begins to exist. It just simply means that his life represents the first moment, and then creation constitutes all subsequent moments.
I wonder, does he say anything about like whether the metric will always be there? Like,
No, he says it does. The metric does not necessarily have to be there, but we commonly associate moments with a metric.
Yeah,
which is understandable, and it's perfectly fine. And he kind of says this in the book. People will think in a colloquial way about time, and that's fine. It's not a biggie. Because people haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it. Okay, so they just think that time is the relationship between events. I mean, I used to think this way, and thankfully, R.T. Mullins, corrected that. But colloquially, that's fine. That's fine. But he calls what he did is a research project, and there aren't many who have endeavored to do a research project on time. Okay.
Hey, Darth, how you doing?
At the moment, I'm doing fine.
Good, good. You watching?
I'm just
Hey,
I'm just
uh
looking. I'm looking for unicorns. I'm looking for T-Rexes, and I'm looking for intelligent, mature-minded atheists to talk to. But I can't find any of them.
That's a good one. That's a good one. A lot of people heard me say this yesterday, but it's like some of these atheists have two brain cells and they're fighting for third place.
Well, I would like to talk with any atheist on this planet who's smart, educated, and mature. Anyone. I don't care who they are. They don't intimidate me, even if they have PhDs. I would love to talk with Dan Barker. In fact, I tried to talk with him, but he didn't want to talk with me. So,
Why do you think he didn't want to talk with you?
I think he was warned not to talk with me.
Wow.
He showed up on Clubhouse, and he gets paid to be a professional atheist. He heads up the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Okay, which
Right.
is just a group that sues places claiming they're violating the Constitution, and just they harass people. But anyway,
Sounds like the ADL.
yeah. So he walks home from work for exercise. I think he's in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where the Freedom from Religion Foundation is. And so he walks home, I guess, for exercise, which is cool. And had the real gift of gab, walking home over 45, 50 minutes talking with all the atheists on Clubhouse. But when he showed up the next day or so, I don't remember what the time frame was, and I was there and I said I wanted to talk with him. And he was walking home from work, but he was joining Clubhouse and actually on stage talking. For some magical reason, he couldn't talk with me. Right?
Right.
No, he was warned ahead of time by Tom Rabbit that Tom Rabbit characterizes as Darth Dawkins is out for you. He's targeting you. That kind of crap.
It'd be hilarious if somebody started uploading the videos and taking away from Tom Rabbit's beer money. That'd be kind of funny.
Well, the knuckle dragging miscreant, pot smoking atheists are still going to flock to his channel because then they can pound away on their keyboards making their just stupid comments.
Yeah. Darth, do you watch any kind of a sidebar? You watch any football?
Occasionally, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not a football fan per se, but I occasionally will watch it.
Gotcha. All right. I was just wondering if you were a fan or not.
Yeah, I'm
Because
not
it's not fair
anti-football.
enough.
I occasionally watch football.
Gotcha. Yeah, since no one's asking, here's the thing, Darth. Everyone knows of you, but no one knows who you are really. Like, what do you enjoy doing? Do you enjoy reading? Are you a fan of history? Like, what type of person would you, if
I
you had to
I
describe
I
yourself?
like I like I like poetry, long walks on the beach, holding hands. No, I'm just kidding. I love watching old movies. Um, they have a character that modern movies don't have. I like talking about movies. I like a lot of soundtrack music, classical music. I like 70s music.
Gotcha.
I love learning about history. I like learning about science, philosophy, metaphysics.
Gotcha.
Thought about watching.
I enjoy reading. I've discovered I got access to an unimaginable amount of PDFs that are more than a life supply of books. I like going to museums. I like dogs.
Gotcha. So you would describe yourself as a lifelong learner then?
I I I think learning is a blast.
He's an Apple fanboy.
Oh, you had to rub it in, didn't you?
thought about watching older movies because modern movies are really crappy, I think.
Well, some
You
older
know,
movies are crappy, but there are some really good old movies.
I will say though, recently watching Oppenheimer, that just restored my faith in modern movies. Oppenheimer was a really good flick.
Well, when it comes online, I'll watch it.
Yeah.
I
Shit, Darth,
enjoyed
I'll
the
send you a
last
link.
Mission Impossible movie.
Shit, you want me to send you a link, Darth?
I'll find it soon when it comes on, or I'll just download it through streaming services.
Gotcha. Well, that's where I was gonna give it to you from. You know.
Um, yeah, I really enjoyed the Mission Impossible movie. That was pretty cool.
With Tom Cruise, right? The
Yeah, the
newer one.
last
Is
one
that
was pretty good.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. So you're into action.
Yeah, I saw the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie. That was pretty good. I thought that was very entertaining.
Oh man, I thought it was horrible. I thought it was
Really?
bad.
Wow. What did you
Yeah,
like
yeah.
about it? What did you like about
So,
it?
so this is what I'm noticing. All Marvel movies just piss me off because it's supposed to be this real serious threat. Like for example, right? There's a man who, if he snaps his fingers, half of the universe is gone. Everyone in it. And they're cracking jokes about Joe Rogan's podcast in the middle of this. And I'm like, man, I just want it to be more serious than what it is. Like DC does a good job of, making it, I guess, more serious. Marvel always has to put in some comedic relief, and I don't know, I don't like that.
Well, that's. I don't think that's an unreasonable criticism.
Yeah, when I was watching
But
Endgame, serious.
Marvel and Disney are screwing themselves because if they don't stop promoting the wokeness, people are going to stop seeing the movies. It's Disney has already lost like over $1 billion because of their wokeness.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think they took notice. I think they took notice. I think there's two more
Uh,
movies. Yeah,
I hope
because
you're right.
I think that Snow White movie or whatever the fuck, it's a super woke actress, and then I think they know that's not selling much, and that's it. That's it. They did some
Well,
I
I
forgot what I
think that
read.
entitling the movie Snow White and the Seven Registered Democrats, isn't going to bode well.
Yeah, it used to be dwarf, but they're like, no, it's not going to be the seven dwarfs
This
anymore.
Snow White and the Seven Little People.
Yeah, that's so fucked up, dude. What happened? I mean, where did this country go wrong?
So you'll notice that we get very few intelligent atheists in here. We either get the village idiots or we get the trolls come in here who are either overtly trolling or they engage in passive aggressive trolling, but no intelligent, mature minded atheists who will step up to the plate.
But I think the crazy part is they still join and they still listen in, but they won't speak up.
You, Darth, who was it you were talking about before who was walking home? Did you say it was Dan Barker? Who was it?
Yeah, Dan Barker, the famous atheist and president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Well, when you said that he had all this time to talk with the atheists about atheism, but didn't want to talk with you, I was reminded of Proverbs 18:17, which says, "The first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him."
Yeah, I even got a
He didn't want his
copy.
neighbor to examine him.
Even got a copy of his book, and it's pathetic.
I also want to, if I can quickly mention, Precept, I haven't forgot about you muting me 10 times yesterday. You're still a douchebag for that.
It was 2 times. It was only for like a minute, man. Relax.
So, Parakeet, I had a couple of heart palpitations the other day because I thought I lost my AirPods, but I didn't, so I recovered. By the way, Parakeet, the Apple event is coming up in a few days. I think it's the 12th. New iPhone, baby.
Okay. Yeah, I have an iPhone now. I've had one for a while.
Oh my goodness.
I switched like a year ago.
But you didn't tell me.
I know I didn't.
Now we got you hooked.
It was just cheaper. I switched to another service provider. It was a cheaper phone, so I went with it.
You ever think the Apple logo is a reference to the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden?
No. Steve Jobs picked Apple so that it would be the first place, if possible, in the stock list. Okay. And the reason why there's a bite out of it is because it's better for trademark purposes rather than just a plain apple. It's easier to protect the apple with a bite out of it than it is just a plain apple.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's
I mean, I don't want to be that person, but actually the truth about it is, although there's some truth to what you're saying, Darth, it was invented by a guy named Ronald Wayne. He co-founded Apple, and he did it because he wanted to represent the law of gravity, which is obviously inspired by an apple. So, yeah.
Well, it was Steve Jobs who picked out the name. Steve Jobs, before he formed Apple for a time, he worked in an apple orchard.
I once ate an apple.
Yeah, no, you're completely right that Steve Jobs did decide on the name, but the actual logo is Ronald Wayne, and there's some nice history behind it.
You're talking about the original logo with the tree.
Yeah, the original Apple logo before it all. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, so not trying to be a douche, just mentioning.
No, not at all. So, do we have any atheists in here who would like to explain why your atheism is reasonable? See, I would probably call in to these atheist YouTube talking head shows, but in the past I have, and they completely put you in a verbal straitjacket when you call in as a way of insulating themselves from answering the hard questions.
Yeah, it's absurd. I mean, the last time I called in to talk to Dillahunty, he hung up on me within the first 2 minutes. He didn't give me a chance to present. I was going to present the argument from contingency, and basically what he did was, as soon as I joined, he started raising objections to the argument in the form of questions. Like, I think the first question he asked me was like, could I demonstrate that it was not impossible for nothing not to exist? That was literally the question that he asked me.
All right, can you demonstrate that it is impossible?
That it's not impossible for nothing not to exist. I mean, there was 3 double negatives, I think, in the question. And I couldn't even get I think what he was basically trying to say was like, if you cannot demonstrate that the state of nothingness is not an impossibility, then it may be an impossibility for nothing for there to be a state of nothingness. And if
it may be a possibility for it to be a state of nothingness, but yeah.
No, that it's an impossibility. He was basically saying that it may be possible that the state of nothingness is an impossibility.
On what
referring to,
on
like,
what grounds
he's
does he
referring to
say
the
that
Big
that's
Bang, like
possible?
before the Big Bang. That's what he's
What you
referring
should
to.
ask him when he says that it's possible, you hit him right between the eyes with the silver bullet. You say, when you say that something is possible, okay, what fundamentally dictates what is, can be, and cannot be?
Yeah.
What's he going to say?
Right.
Because
he's probably going to say the laws of physics. He's going to say like the laws of physics or something.
Yeah, but he would not be able to demonstrate that, thereby violating his own criterion of belief. Okay, so we can talk about epistemic possibilities or conceptual, possibilities, but when we're talking about ontological possibilities, okay, being that he does not accept the God world, he has no singular, concrete, identifiable ground of being that dictates what is, can be, and cannot be. So, for example, when Lawrence Krauss boldly stated, we don't need God, we can explain everything through the laws of physics, and then it was my turn to ask him a question. I said, what is foundational and fundamental that dictates what is, can be, and cannot be? He very angrily responded, I don't know, and why does it even matter? Well, the reason, you know why he got angry, because he's smart enough to know that he got his bluff called. He was pretending like he had a full house and he had no matching cards.
That's fucking funny, man. Bunny, are you an atheist?
No. I was just trying to like re-explain what you were saying.
Yeah, I think what he was trying to explain is it possible that nothing exists, and there's no way to disprove that. Maybe that's what the guy was saying.
Well, yeah, we
And
can.
honestly,
We could
to be
prove
honest
it.
with you, I would even agree with that as like a
No,
God-believing
no.
person. They could... Wait,
No. He's saying the opposite. He's saying.
First? I would
was responding to object. Sure, but God.
I would agree with that, like, even as like someone who believes in God, because it's like, okay, well, before God even like made the world or anything, there was probably nothing except God.
Right, but
that's not nothing.
Yeah, that's not nothing, exactly.
I mean, it's not nothing, but it's not anything tangible. God isn't something that I can pull out of a
No. God
hat,
is a concrete object.
No, it's not. I can't touch him.
Okay, all right. You're not understanding. Okay,
that's not what concrete means. It doesn't mean
concrete. Concrete, it means it's something that is actual and real, but it's not an abstraction of the mind. Okay, concrete doesn't mean that it's made out of molecules or atoms.
Okay, well, how do you know that God isn't made out of molecules or atoms?
How do I know? Because molecules and atoms
how do you know
are.
that God isn't something concrete?
Because he tells us about himself.
Molecules are
does the Bible
something is
explain
concrete.
Because
you want an answer?
Like, unless you know what God is composed of, then even you can't.
You're not understanding the nature of concrete versus abstract. Okay.
I don't, dude. I don't think you're
Hey, Bunny, you're bordering.
I just
Bunny,
asked you another question.
Bunny,
Do you know what God is composed of? You're saying that you know what God is composed of, and that He's composed of these other things that are non-concrete things that are, something that you can't touch, but it's not nothing. And what I'm saying is, how the fuck do you know?
You're misusing the word concrete.
Hold on. Hey, Bunny, you need to slow down unless you passed out from hyperventilating. Okay.
Okay, well, I asked you one question. You can either
answer Bunny, or pass out. Bunny, I'm trying to respond to you. Wow, she doesn't stop, does she?
Okay, well, maybe if you responded,
you're like the Energizer Bunny.
Like,
you just keep on going and going.
Bullshit,
wow, you must be a joy on a blind date. Wow, you just don't stop, do you?
No, like when people like
you see, you won't even let me get a word in edgewise. Do you know you're about to be server muted?
Okay, well that's retarded.
Okay,
like
hey
what?
Bunny, do you know how? Hey Bunny, you just won't stop. Are you going to let me get a word in edgewise?
Oh my fucking yeah! If you want to respond, you can at any time.
Hey, Bunny.
But I asked you the question.
Wow.
And you're not responding.
Did you take your Ritalin today, Bunny?
Look again with these fucking side comments.
Yeah, I'm giving you an
Time
insult
that
because
you're
you just won't
spending
stop.
insulting
You
my
just won't
fucking
stop, will you?
intelligence, you could answer
Yeah.
the fucking question.
Yeah, and now the hostilities.
So stop
I'm pointing out that you won't stop.
and just answer
Hey,
the
Bunny,
fucking
I'm warning
question.
you. Earth to Bunny, I'm warning you. If you don't stop, you're about to get server muted.
Look, I don't give a shit if you server
Okay,
mute.
server muter, get rid of her.
Molecules
Put
are
her back in the
created.
kitchen.
Like the fuck.
Molecules are not
Back in the
eternal.
kitchen with you,
Why they
Bunny.
can't be
Back in the kitchen.
Okay, yeah,
molecules.
Bunny, I was trying to respond to you, and every time I tried to respond to you, you're just such a unhinged motor mouth. Okay, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, because if you did know what you're talking about, you would welcome your views to be examined and critiqued. I know what I'm talking about on these subjects matter, and I welcome people critiquing and criticizing my views and calling my views into question. Okay, but he just doesn't know how to take a breath. It's a good thing we server muted her so she didn't pass out for lack of breathing.
So explain how it's because molecules are created. Or they're not eternal. Therefore,
molecules are temporal contingent states. They begin to exist. God does not begin to exist, and God tells us that He is a spirit. Okay, and that things that are spirit are not things that are composed of things in the material world. They are of some other essence or substance. Okay, so that's how we know. Okay, but Bunny knows it all. She's just been invited by the Encyclopedia Britannica to write several new entries.
Well,
She also
hers was
keeps using the word concrete to mean physical or tangible rather than
spatial.
real
Right,
or actual.
Right. Yeah, she doesn't understand that like the number 2 is an abstract object and not a concrete object. Okay.
Oh, I thought she was asking you a question. I didn't hear it.
Yeah,
I came in
her
late
question.
though.
Let me
Well,
rephrase.
she wouldn't shut up long enough so there could be a conversation.
Yeah. So her question was, how do you know that God cannot be composed of molecules? And the reason is because molecules are not eternal.
Yeah.
Well, the
And God
reason
is
is
revealed that
because
He's a spirit.
God tells us about Himself.
And also God is not made of like discrete parts.
Yeah, I mean, molecules are created, they're begotten, they're temporal, they're bound by space. Yeah, so I mean, they're not eternal. God is eternal.
In theory, could a molecule be eternal, like without violating?
Then you have to change. Then you have to change the definition of molecule. I mean, this is the thing. Like, and the atheist often does this. They'll say, "Well, what about eternal energy or energy that causes other energy?" Well, then now you've got to change definitions to get your way.
Are you saying that a molecule will decompose after a certain amount of time?
Yeah, of course. I mean, any spatial object, because of the second law, is going to be. It's going to change something else.
Well, we answered that question. Bunny, I hope you got the answer to your question.
Here's another thing. Molecules are bound by space. They can't just be one molecule cannot be the entire spatial space of the universe. They're bound by space, and God is not bound. God caused space. And so molecules, on the other hand, are bound by it. Any spatial object is bound by space.
Surprised, Bunny. I thought somebody was saying she was a theist. I'm surprised she asked that question, but.
What's up, my dude?
What's up, Trace?
Oh, what's up, little boy? Have you ever grown up yet, or are you still acting like a 4-year-old?
I thought the same
What?
way that abstract and concrete were opposites. I thought that too, but I guess I was
6,000
wrong.
years old. I'm the devil. What do you mean? Oh, okay.
That concrete meant something physical. I thought that too.
Yeah. So there. Yeah, it just depends on the question, right? So, but yeah.
That's a whole lot of butts, miss. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a shame. Darth isn't here.
Oh, did he leave?
Oh. Ooh.
No.
It's your channel now, object.
Dropped off. I just want to remind the room that when Darth is away, I'm master of the room. So I'll mute myself, but I'll be watching everyone very closely.
What's up, Chungus?
So basically,
What's up, dude? How's your day going, my man?
Pretty good.
Good, good. Glad to hear.
Are you an atheist, Chungus?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would depend on what you mean exactly, but pretty much, yeah.
Do you lack the belief that God exists?
Yes.
Do you also lack the belief that there are no gods?
Do I like the belief that there are no gods? You'd have to explain in more detail.
So somebody could have the belief that there are no gods, right? And I'm asking, like, do you have that belief or do you
Okay,
lack
yeah,
that
no,
belief?
I understand what the question is, but it does. What do you mean by the belief in the lack of something? Like, is
So
it an intuition or
somebody could believe that God does not exist.
it's intuitional to me, yes.
Somebody
But
could be convinced by the evidence and the reasoning and everything and their intuitions and all of the data that God does not exist. They could have
I would
that
say,
belief. I'm asking, do
uh,
you have that belief or do you lack that belief?
uh, I would say it's not a strong belief, but yes,
So wait, you do have it?
it's not a strong belief, but yes, I do have it.
Okay, so why don't you just say that you believe that God does not exist?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask to clarify.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're not sure, right? You're just saying that you have no evidence of it, right?
Sorry?
You're not saying for sure that there no God has ever existed or will ever exist or does. You're just saying you have no evidence to think there is one, right?
Plus, there is evidence to the contrary. Like,
What evidence? What
be-
evidence is that? Like, what supports your claim that God does not exist?
It depends on the God.
because as we, you know, go down into the exploration of the natural world, things generally get less and less complex rather than more and more complex, and God is the most complex being imaginable. So it wouldn't make much sense for us to get down to the most fundamental and the least complex explanation that would then be contingent upon the most complex explanation. Seems quite counterintuitive.
Well, so I would say a couple of things. I mean, it's not always true that like reductionism leads you to like more and more like simple things. So that's number one. There's no law of physics that says that or anything. There's no metaphysical principle that says that. But then number two, like, are you familiar with the concept of divine simplicity?
No.
Okay, that's like it's the idea that like God is actually simple, like he's not complex.
How, okay, by God, do you mean a mind or?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how a mind can be simple. I think that's the opposite of what simple is. I think it's currently like the human brain is the most complex thing we have access to, and that's what produces a mind. So, like, that doesn't make much sense to me. And with regards to the first objection, that reductionism doesn't necessarily lead to simpler explanations, I would disagree with that because in principle, if you come up with a reductionist explanation of something, that explanation of the base principles is going to be less complex than the overall picture. Because the overall picture also includes the base principles. Like,
So is that a metaphysical principle? Like what are you claiming is the source for that claim?
which claim?
That like as that reductionism leads to like causes that are more simple than their effects.
Well, that's just like a think it through principle.
Do you have a
Like,
source for
if
that?
do I have a it's do I have no? It's like having
Yeah,
a
like
source for
is it a
simplicity.
scientific claim or is it a metaphysical claim, a philosophical claim? Like what is like the
Philosophical,
basis of the
yeah.
claim? It's just
I
a
mean,
philosophical claim, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, by the way, regarding the complexity, you're conflating the complexity of the material world with a mind, and it doesn't follow from that.
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that, please? I didn't get it.
Yeah, you're conflating the complexity of the material world with God's mind, as though God's mind had parts to it. You're confusing the complexity of propositions held um,
I
versus
don't.
component. Yeah, so that's a non sequitur for the establishment of atheism.
Can I
So
respond?
God, so God. Okay, so here's the question: God doesn't exist because.
Wait, so can I respond to the initial objection? Or are we changing the topic?
Just give me your best answer why God doesn't exist.
Why God doesn't exist, or why I believe God doesn't exist?
That's a distinction without a difference.
It is because whilst when saying what I believe, I don't necessarily have to claim a metaphysical truth. I can just rely on Bayesian probability.
No, you can't. That's a category error.
Yeah, I can.
No, that's a category error. I'll tell
No,
you
it's
why.
not.
No, probabilistic assessment has to do with background information. God's existence isn't subject to background information.
Yes, but my beliefs are subject to
No, sir,
verification.
you got to focus. You need to respond to what I say. Okay, ignore it. So you can't make a probabilistic assessment of God's existence because God's existence isn't subject to background information.
What my belief of his existence is.
You're not getting this. Okay, you're ignoring what I'm saying to you. Okay,
What am I ignoring?
probabilistic assess probabilistic assessments require background information.
Yeah, and I have
Okay.
information in my
Okay,
apparent.
listen. Focus. This is the biggest problem I have with people like you. You don't focus either inadvertently or on purpose. Okay,
No, no, I'm focusing. I'm trying
okay,
my best.
sir. Okay, then focus now. In
I
order
am
to make a
focusing.
probabilistic, okay, no, you keep on interrupting. Now, to make a probabilistic assessment about the actuality of X, you must have access to the background information that provides for X's actuality or existence. Correct?
Yeah, and the back.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Yeah. So God, by definition, wouldn't have background information. He would he, he
Um,
would he would not be encapsulated or enveloped by anything. So there's no background information.
can I respond?
Okay? Yeah. What is the
So
background information? What is the background information needed for any probabilistic assessment? It's two things. What is it?
wait, okay.
What is the
If
background
if you
information that is required for probabilistic assessment? It's two things. What are they?
it's anything in my parent universe.
Okay, you're not getting this. I'll ask the question again. In
You
order
can
to
ask
do
it
a
again, but
okay, sir, listen. In
I'm
order to do a
listening. Yeah.
probabilistic assessment, overtalk me again and you're done. Okay? Now, in order to do a probabilistic assessment, there are two things that you must have access to, okay, within background information in order to do probabilistic assessment. What are those two things?
I don't know which two things you're referring to exactly.
Okay, then you.
Wait, can
So
I finish
what?
my response, or are you just
So
going
you
to
don't.
talk over
Okay, so
me?
you don't. No, you just gave me your response. So you don't
No, I
know
didn't finish
what
it.
concept. Okay, you know what, dude? I've dealt with you before. I've just about had it with you. So you
Oh, fuck
don't
off,
know
Darth.
what. Okay,
No, like I've been really nice with
yeah.
you. You're
Hey,
just
Chunk. No,
lagging
you
out for
haven't.
no
You've been
reason.
rude multiple times.
No, Chungus is
You
a
don't. So
fucking
you don't.
sick cunt. I like him.
Okay, mute that guy, please. Okay.
Why? Because
So
I'm defending someone?
Okay, would you please mute him, please? We don't allow drive-by trolling here. Okay. Okay. So Chungus, so you want to tell me that you can do a probabilistic assessment for something? You told me it requires background information. What constitutes the background information?
Anything in my apparent universe. Anything
No,
from my.
then you don't
Wait,
understand
okay, you don't
the
like the
problem.
answer,
Okay. All right.
but
You know what? I'm trying to explain it to you. Okay.
I thought we were having a
Now
conversation.
you want to learn or you don't? Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to learn.
Okay. Good. Then why don't you stop interrupting when I'm speaking?
I answered your
Okay.
question.
Okay, Tungus, I've explained to you. I will say one last time. I'm losing my patience with you.
Me too.
I'm trying to. Okay, goodbye. Mute him. We're done. Obviously, he didn't take his Ritalin or Adderall this morning. He can't control his mouth. Okay, so we're done. So he wants to sit there and say he can make a probabilistic assessment of anything, including God, and that probabilistic assessment requires background information, but he doesn't know qualitatively or quantitatively what that background
I just
information
told you it's
must be.
anything. It's
Okay. Would
any
we please mute? Would you
sense
please mute Chungus,
data from
please?
sense
Would the
perception.
moderator please
Like
mute Chungus?
Yeah, my mute button's not working. I just hold on.
Okay. All right. Well, go in and out again, and then mute Chungus because he can't control his mouth.
Oh, now it's working.
Okay. Good. Good. We're done. So the two things are: you need to know what's static and dynamic. Okay, or what is static and not dynamic. Dynamic. To put it differently, what is regular and what is irregular in order to make a probabilistic assessment. See how hard that was? So, see, I got him, caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. He didn't know what needed to be in the background information that we have access to in order to make a probabilistic assessment. So, what he tried to do was bullshit his way out of it. Okay? And that is what bullshitters do. That's why he kept on over talking me.
Yeah, and Chungus, you should look up divine simplicity, because that's another response to your objection.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't agree with divine simplicity, but that would be an objection that he would be able to handle either.
Yeah.
Yeah, what he's doing is he's conflating the notion that in our material world things are complex in terms of parts. So where does
Yeah,
it entail
that's a
that
good point.
a mind has to have parts? He's conflating the idea of the complexity of thoughts held And he's conflating the complexity of parts to the complexity of thoughts held.
What do you mean by of a mind?
A mind is an entity that possesses cognition, volition, affect.
Those parts? That just seems like properties, right? But properties and parts aren't identical.
No, they're not. They're not parts. They're what we call distinctions. Okay. So if I have it, suppose I have a solid cube, right? Right, and it has no parts. Okay. We're not talking about atoms or molecules. It's just one thing. The cube has three dimensions. Okay, it has three internal distinctions, um, but it's one thing. Okay.
I don't think I was clear. So yeah, I agree. But you said a mind doesn't necessarily have to have parts. How, if a mind does have parts, what would those parts be? I'm not clear on.
I'm not. I'm not saying they do.
Okay, so you think a mind
Yeah.
is just something simpler?
I think I don't know what the root ontology of a mind is. Okay. I can kind of describe to you characteristics of the mind, but I can't give you its root ontology.
Okay. I was just so because you said a mind doesn't necessarily have to have parts. That's what threw me because in this conception of a mind, right? It doesn't seem that it it can have parts the way that I'm getting your notion of a mind, right? So it would
Okay.
necessarily not have parts.
Is the dimension of height for a cube a part of the cube? Is it a part or a distinction within the cube?
I don't know. I mean, it would depend on.
No, it's not. It's not a
Not
part.
a part. It's not a part. No.
It's a distinction within the unity of the cube.
I also don't understand like the objection. I mean, like, I could produce something like I could write a book, and is the objection is that whatever was the cause of the book has to be simpler than the book? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, how am I simpler than a book that I write? A
It's
month.
another one of these failed atheist arguments.
Yeah.
Why would it matter? If laws was simpler or more complicated.
He raised the objection that like the cause of the universe had to be something like more simple than the universe.
Okay, I didn't hear that part. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was before you joined.
But uh, he's what he said is not to be taken seriously because he demonstrated by his disposition and demeanor that he wasn't a serious player. He wanted to be constantly be interruptive and rude. So he wasn't about having a serious conversation.
Who was it? I was AFK, Darth. Someone pitch in.
Tungus. He has the picture of Linus.
What did he say?
He tried to argue that God cannot exist because in order for there to be an eternal mind, it couldn't be composed of parts. It would be complicated. But he's confusing the complexity of thought versus the complexity of material things.
I don't think that was his. He wasn't saying that's why he thought God can't exist. He was saying that's so that proves it. He was saying that's why he didn't believe. Right? He said that it's a Bayesian sort of thing of his belief state, not on
Yeah.
necessarily the truth of it.
Well, then now he's
So
doing
he
an
believes
identity
it.
swap.
He
No,
believes it
listen,
arbitrarily.
he's informally denying God rather than formally, and still a denial. Okay. The people want to claim to be atheists because they know it's the only single word in the English language designated for those who deny the existence of God. They wear it with honor, but then they bastardize the word by redefining it and pretending that they're an agnostic, that they are without a positive belief in God, but they're not constituting the denial of God. It's the classic bait and switch that the atheists do.
But if someone explains to you what they mean by a word when they say it, it's not a bait and switch, right?
Yeah, but
Sir,
Slushy,
sir, listen, hold on a second. Sir, listen to me. The word atheist is well defined in reference literature as well as in philosophical works, and they are redefining the word with the purpose of being ambiguous, okay, so as to insulate themselves from defending their view.
Okay, well, let me push back on
If,
that slightly.
because they're defining atheism as non-theism, so now they don't have to defend their view. It's just atheism is now just a psychological state wherein they have an absence of a positive belief. But why are they selecting the only word in the English language which designates those who deny the existence of God when they can claim to be an agnostic? Because an agnostic is somebody who claims to be without a positive belief in God. I suggest that you read the paper on the definition of atheism and the
Well,
burden of proof.
hang on one
May I
second.
finish, please? May I finish? I strongly suggest you read the paper on the definition of atheism and the burden of proof by Malik, Malek. It's a tour de force paper on the definition.
Okay, give me just 1 second here, right? So the word radical means something years, right? And it meant something that was simply outside of convention. I mean, if someone's explaining to you what they mean when they say a word, right?
You're not
And
understanding. You're
I
not
do
understanding.
understand.
Okay, good. So here's the problem. If we all start using proprietary definitions, then we're going to have a breakdown in communication. They are
How
deliberately.
about
Okay,
how
hold
about
on a second.
Slushy? How about I call you a murderer? But what I mean by murderer is just that you use the name Slushy on Discord. Can we all
Yeah.
call
If
you a
you
murderer
explain
from
that
now
every
on? Because
single
we just
time, that's
mean you have.
fine.
No, sir,
Yeah. Well,
listen,
how
if
about
you
I
don't
don't explain it?
understand, listen to me. Communication is based upon the fact that we're using common understandings for the meanings of words. So atheists are calling themselves atheists, but they're attempting to redefine it, okay, for a philosophical advantage. That's why it's being done. Okay? There's already a word in the English language which lays claim that where one has an absence of positive belief of God without the denial. Okay, that's what it's called agnostic. Okay, so do you understand that communication is based upon that there is a common agreement to words, right? All right. If you don't believe me, Slushy, do you know who Jeffrey J. Louder is?
No.
Hello. Okay, Jeffrey J. Louder is one of the smartest atheists I've ever heard lecture before. Okay, he's the founder of Internet Infidels, one of the largest atheist internet sites in the world. He wrote in one of his own blogs, atheists continue to shoot themselves in their foot by not having an agreed upon definition of atheism. Okay? Now, when you define atheism as a lack of belief, that's non-informative. Okay? Okay, let me ask you this question. Sashi, does every atheist who outright denies the existence of God, do they lack a positive belief in God?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not informative when you say atheism is a lack of belief.
So, okay, I think there's a misunderstanding here. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be clearer on their terminology. All I'm saying is that if someone says, uses a term, right, even if it's an idiosyncratic way, but then explain what they mean, then it's not in bad faith. It's merely idiosyncratic.
No, it's worse than that. It's stupidity.
Maybe some people are
Yeah, but
stupid.
Slushy, it's not that they're just if they were doing what you're saying and we're having a casual conversation about like what did you just order for your appetizer or something, then I understand your point. But we're trying to like get to like a truth like claim. We're trying to like make progress in finding truth, and what we're saying is the redefinition isn't helpful for that purpose.
So in general parlance, I agree. But that whoever that dude just was that was talking explained what he meant. That's all I'm saying. He explained it, so he wasn't being duplicitous. So in general, you're right,
It doesn't
and I
follow.
agree.
It doesn't follow someone's not trying to be duplicitous just because they give a proprietary definition. Just like if I was calling you a murderer constantly, but when someone said, "Hey, he's not a murderer," I'd say, "Oh, well, I just mean that his name is Slushy on Discord." It's obvious deception.
Slushy, do me a favor. Read the paper on the definition of atheism and the burden of proof by Malik. Okay? Malik is not a Bible thumper. He doesn't profess to be a Christian that I'm aware of. Read the paper. Okay? It's a 4-to-4 scholarly work. Slushy, is there a single word in the entire English language which designates those who deny God? Does such a word exist?
Yeah, and we're not even disagreeing. I'm simply
What is that word?
Of course, it's atheist, and I'm simply
Okay, so they're
offering
using the only word in the entire English language which designates those who deny the existence of God to mean that they don't deny the existence of God. Okay, do you see the problem? Look, Slushy, many of them do this on purpose, and those who are less intelligent do so inadvertently. But the end result is to have a non standard definition, whereas to insulate themselves from having to defend what their real position is. Okay? Do you know? Let me ask you a question. How many man hours do you think I have personally spent discussing this issue with people on the internet over the last 13 years? Okay, unimaginable number of hours in total. It's a total waste of time because this word atheism and agnosticism and theism are well defined in reference literature, dictionaries, encyclopedias, including philosophical dictionaries and encyclopedias. It is only a certain group of atheists who are bastardizing this word simply to have a philosophical advantage.
As a form of intellectual heel dragging.
Yeah, that's
Get bogged down in the
beautiful.
definition for 2 hours.
As Al Pacino said in The Irishman, that's beautiful, beautiful.
that was a good movie, actually.
It was too long, but it was a good movie.
It was super long, but I thought they did an amazing job. And I forgave the length because it was so well written and
Yes,
acted and directed.
I completely
It was
agree with you.
amazing.
Let me ask you this real quick. The de-aging was fantastic, but let me ask you
Yeah,
if
oh
you
my God,
noticed
that was
this.
incredible.
Yeah, the only problem was, and this, I'm not really being critical. I don't think that they're able to solve this yet. But Robert De Niro moved like he was a man in his 75 when they were making him look like
Yeah.
he was
So
40 or 35.
I agree. I think they did a good job covering that, though, with the camera shots and things. Right? They did a very good job working with what they
Yeah,
had to work with there.
yeah, it was a
And
superb movie.
I could overlook that because I mean, just because the effects could make him look 50 years younger doesn't mean he was.
No. How about Joe Pesci? Wasn't he superb?
Yeah. Did you see what was that one that had who's that guy? He gained a bunch of weight, right? And was that psycho
They talk
my
about
God,
in
what?
The Irishman?
No, this was a different Netflix movie, but it was also amazing. God, it was the one where the lady and her kid meet him. He's driving this truck, right? And she has a little bit of road rage, and he goes full batshit crazy trying to murder them. The whole movie. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No,
I don't
I
know. Why
don't.
don't you
Sorry.
just Google it, dude?
Okay, that's good.
All
That's
right, so
it.
let's get back to our discussion. Okay, there's a reason why self-proclaimed atheists opt for an ambiguity. There's a reason why. Why are they not opting for the standard definition? Ask yourself this question. If the standard definition is so ubiquitous throughout the English world, why are they opting for a definition that
It's
is
the shift.
ambiguous?
It's what you said. It's the shift to burden, so they don't have any burden of proof.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Atheism, if you go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and the Internet Encyclopedia, they have some pretty good articles on, what atheism is. You can also go to several encyclopedias of philosophy. Now, nobody is disputing that some people will use the word atheist to mean only a mere absence of belief that doesn't constitute the denial. Nobody's disputing that that is done. But the point is, it is completely unwise. Okay? It creates confusion, it creates ambiguity, right?
Yeah.
It lacks precision when it's better that we're precise about the meaning of these terms. Okay? If they merely lack a positive belief without the constitutive denial, well, there's a word for that. It's called agnostic. Okay, but then when you explain this, then they go, "Oh, I don't believe," but I don't say I don't know, which is more double talk.
Or like what I think they like to do is like all of a sudden it shifts to like agnostic means knowledge, and the person who's agnostic doesn't know that like God
No,
exists. Like
no. Agnostic includes knowledge and belief. Okay, T.H. Huxley specifically said this. Okay, he invented the term. Okay, agnosticism is not limited to knowledge. Okay, because knowledge is a
exactly.
look. If you take a look at what Steve McRae says, I don't like Steve McRae. I think he's have an overly inflated opinion of himself, but even he has come out and said this is absurd when atheists redefine atheism as a mere lack of belief.
Yeah. London, you're an atheist, right?
No, I'm a Christian theist.
No, London, the gentleman below you, London 87.
Oh no, he's a troll. Mute London 87. Okay, yeah, he's a troll scumbag. Bye bye London.
Yeah, I've seen that guy troll.
Yeah, he's a piece of garbage. He's trolled for years on Discord, so he doesn't get any reprieve. He is an unrelenting, unrepentant disruptor and troll.
He's got both the atheist and agnostic tag, so he's the type of person we were talking about. The burden. They're defining atheism as like a burden shifting fallacy.
There's only very few instances where you will find a professional philosopher who will either use or identify as an agnostic atheist. Okay, most of them do not, because this is a stupid compound term. Because either way you define atheism, okay, it presents a problem. Because atheism defined as the denial of God is you're not suspending judgment, whereas agnosticism you're suspending judgment. So you're not suspending judgment, and then you are. Or if atheism simply means a lack of positive belief, which would be a suspension of judgment, then you're suspending judgment. You're suspending judgment. So either way, the word atheist is defined in that compound term. Either way, whether atheism means the denial or simply the absence of positive belief, to add the word agnostic to it as a compound term is just stupid. It's the first one. If an agnostic atheist is simply the lack of belief, then agnostic atheist is simply a redundancy. If we define agnostic atheist and atheist means the denial, so you're suspending judgment and you're denying?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and also
and so one more thing, they'll say, well, I believe there's no God, but I don't. So that's an unimportant, it's a trivial distinction.
I got a question.
Right.
So why couldn't someone say that they don't believe but suspend judgment? That'd be saying I don't think he exists, but I could be wrong.
It doesn't matter. You could say that about anything.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I say all the time that I think
believe
something, but I could be wrong.
No, I could say I believe the moon orbits the Earth, but I could be wrong. So what?
Yeah, you could say that.
So Slushy, what would you say about do you lack the belief that there are no gods?
All right, let me just say one more thing before I have a senior moment, and then you repeat that in a second. It doesn't matter that somebody adds a qualifier. I could be wrong. These are both positive statements that something is the case. So what's the difference if somebody says the moon orbits the Earth and somebody else says the moon orbits the Earth, but I could be wrong?
Well, because in the second case, they're saying they're not certain, right? They have less than 100% confidence.
It doesn't matter. But they're okay. But do you understand that they're both making positive pronouncements that something is the case? The qualifier, but I could be wrong, it's a triviality. It's unimportant. Who cares if they could?
The point Darth is making is saying I could be wrong does not alleviate your burden of defending your assertion.
Yeah,
it's an assertion whether you say I could be wrong or. Of course, you could be wrong, right? Like it's
the person who says I believe God does not exist, meaning that I could be wrong, versus a person says I believe God doesn't exist, and I can't be wrong. Where you say, well, one believes God doesn't exist, one knows. It's irrelevant because they're both belief states affirming that God doesn't exist. The fact that somebody says, "But I could be wrong," makes they're giving a weaker form of belief. So what if it's a weaker form of belief?
Of course, you could be wrong. We believe you are wrong, but it's still an assertion.
Yeah,
Wait,
yeah.
you don't think
so
that?
Okay, so all right. So hold on a second. What's the difference between knowledge and belief?
Between knowledge and belief, there are two differences, right? The justification and the truth.
Okay.
Beliefs aren't necessarily justified.
Okay, so that's not necessarily, but how many people will offer up a belief that something is the case without any warrant or justification in view?
Yeah, not often. Not often. I merely said that because it could be.
Right. So I agree with you that in philosophy we say knowledge is a justified true belief. Okay. But belief states are also considered to be justified unless you're talking about pure fideism. Okay. So
Yeah, usually there are things you can believe that not justified.
Right, but that would be product of fideism. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay, so the distinction between knowledge and belief is just a matter of emphasis. Right?
I'm sorry, it's a matter of what?
It's a matter of emphasis, where one who claims to know something is saying that they have a positive attitude that something is the case, and they have more justification and warrant rather than lesser. Because rarely will somebody believe something without some warrant or justification. So the difference between knowledge and belief states, knowledge is where somebody considers that they have greater warrant and justification rather than lesser. So the distinction is a fine one, and it's an unimportant, it's a trivial distinction. I'm not saying we shouldn't make the distinction, that's fine. But when somebody says, I believe God does not exist, and somebody says, I know God exists, okay, then the question is, then is your belief that God does not exist, is that arbitrary, making it irrational? Because then if it's not arbitrary, then from their view, they have some warrant or justification that God doesn't exist, making it then a trivial distinction between that and knowledge.
Yeah, that's fair. It's going to take long.
Okay. Again, atheists who say, I believe God does not exist, but I don't know, although that distinction may be true from their point of view in the reasoning, it's simply done to minimize their responsibility to support their view.
Yeah, they want to win the argument because they want to take the position that like they don't have to defend the claim that there is no God. You have to just if all they could do is like raise objections to your arguments, then they feel they won the argument.
Then
Okay, so again, with knowledge, whenever anyone claims knowledge, is anyone claiming omniscience? No. So it's always a higher degree of warrant justification rather than lesser. So when an atheist says, I believe God does not exist, but I don't know it, say, okay, why do you believe that? And then typically what they will do is they will try to pretend that they're agnostics without identifying with the agnostic label.
Can I rewind a second to the original
and
point?
you know what's interesting? And again, I don't mean any insult to anybody here, but again, we've wasted more man hours debating these definitions where there shouldn't be any debate. A theist is somebody who not only believes, but is putting forth the proposition that at least one God exists. An atheist is somebody who believes and puts forth the proposition that no gods exist. An agnostic is somebody who claims to suspend judgment. It's actually very simple.
It should really be nipped in the bud because it's spreading. Because now I'm hearing people saying agnostic theist, and it's like I just roll my eyes at that.
Why? You can say that you believe in God, but you're not 100% certain. Right? You can say that you're not certain about anything.
That is a trivial distinction. I'm not saying there's not a distinction. It's trivial. It's unimportant.
I don't think confidence is unimportant.
No. I'm saying the distinction is unimportant. Because, confidence is on a spectrum here. Unless, of course, the person holds to a belief because they're a fideist. You know what a fideist is?
Only loosely, not something
a fideist is somebody who believes that something is the case without any warrant or justification. They just believe.
Like a leap of faith.
Look, the point is this. Atheists are bastardizing the definition of atheism so as to mask the propositional content that they hold to. If you look at the literature there by philosophers, they'll say that it is unwise and it is the best way in communication is to say that theism is propositional in nature, not just a belief state. And atheism is propositional in nature, not merely the absence of a belief. And agnosticism is the claim to suspend judgment. This provides accuracy, it provides clarity, and there's no ambiguity, which it rules out somebody trying to insulate themselves.
Yeah, the whole thing, it just becomes totally Slushy. Do you lack the belief, Slushy, that God exists? Yes, I do. Okay. Do you also lack the belief that God does not exist? Do I also lack the belief that God does?
Titanium alloy.
I'm sorry, what was that? Well, I didn't hear the last thing that was said. No, somebody was interrupting. I was asking you, do you also lack the belief that God does not exist? No. So you have the belief that God does not exist? Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm agnostic. If you have that
classical conception. I don't think he's understanding you.
So you, so you're when you say you're an atheist, Slushy, like you affirmatively believe that God does not exist.
Yes.
Okay. So why? So you're just defending this for what reason? Why are you defending this?
No. All I'm saying is that well, regarding the confidence thing, I don't think that is a distinction without a difference. I think that is very important. Um, and going back to the other thing, right? So I don't disagree that people should be much clearer in their terminology, right? I agree with that. I'm simply, I was trying to answer his question.
Yeah, I just want to make a point. So I'm a theist, right? Now,
Absolutely.
so suppose I told you that my theism constitutes I lack belief in the not God world.
Okay.
Would that give a non-ambiguous representation of my position?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Give a non-ambiguous what?
Yeah. If I tell you I lack belief in the not God world, if I said that to an atheist, they would just say that's just verbiage trying to hide my proposition that I believe that God exists. You have to understand
I would have taken that as identical.
Okay, listen. You have to
Because you're
understand when we
saying the
talk
same
about
thing.
when we talk about God, we're not talking about the Loch Ness monster. We're talking about the ground of all being. So you can suspend judgment about the Loch Ness monster. You can't suspend judgment about God because of the category that God is in. Okay. Also, the denial of God can be both formal and informal, direct and indirect, explicit or implicit. Atheists try to represent their view that the only way to deny God is to do it formally, direct, or explicitly, which is false. So that's why they hide behind these word games where they want to redefine atheism to mean I'm a non theist. You know what a theological non cognitivist is?
Yes.
Okay. They lack belief in God too.
Yeah, but a non-cognitivist would say that that the thing that they are non-cognitivist towards cannot
But you're not
be
understanding. When you define it that way, you're now introducing ambiguity. And the purpose of language is to look, what if I came to you, right? And I start making grunting noise. You go, what? The purpose of language is to bring about clarity and to reduce or eliminate ambiguity. Atheists are redefining atheism, and it's bringing about problems, confusion, ambiguity.
Honestly, you should have a bigger problem with this than we do, because you're the atheist. And you're representing this like horrible position.
Okay, how many atheists would tolerate me prancing around going, I'm Darth Dawkins. I lack belief in a not God world. I lack belief in atheism. I just have a lack of belief in atheism. Okay?
We start defining atheism as believing in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. That's essentially what they're doing. They're just making it nonsense.
I'm a atheist.
Hey,
Can I talk for a
Slushy,
second?
read that. Yeah,
I
Slushy,
lack belief in their lack
read,
of belief.
Slushy, write this down, okay? On the definition of atheism by Malek, Malek. It's a scholarly paper. It's not that long. You would profit from reading it, okay? And he's no Bible thumper.
Can I take like 30 seconds?
Yes, go ahead. Take your time.
Okay, so 2 points. First of all, I've said like 6 times, I agree that people should be more specific with their language, right? Now, back to the original point. As that, whoever that guy before was, right? And if someone explains what they mean by it, that is fine. You can continue talking with them, right? And saying that you
Okay, why are
disbelieve
they
the
doing that?
non-God world is
Why
exactly
are
the same
they
as saying you believe the God world.
Slushy? Why are they changing and using abandoning the standard definition of atheism?
Right? Because I mean, in whatever groups they talk with, right? Whatever community that introduced that term, that's how they use it. It's, I mean, terms change all the time. Language, if you go back 200 years, you wouldn't be able to talk to half the people because words mean different things, right?
Yeah,
The
but this is
same word.
purposeful. This is purposeful, not
See,
inadvertent.
I don't see any reason to read ill intent into people's
It's just
into
not helpful,
changing idiom.
Slushy. It's not helpful. That's it. They don't have to have ill intent. They're not. It's not helpful. Period.
I've already agreed. I think people should be more specific on their terms.
Slushy, this is not a natural, inadvertent cultural shift. The way the meaning of words change. Okay,
But
so for
I
example,
think,
okay, hold on a
D-
second,
Darth, I don't
Slushy.
think
How?
he's okay.
Let me just
I
say
don't know
something
why
before I
you think
forget.
I'm disagreeing.
Okay, Slushy, how old are you?
40.
Okay, so you may be old enough to remember the 70s, right?
Oh no.
Okay, okay. So the word "gay" before the
Yeah, it used to
late
mean happy.
1960s,
Yeah,
right, and so now it means people who are homosexuals. Now,
sure.
was that change in the meaning of that word inadvertent, or was it purposeful?
Oh,
That
I have
they
no
had a
idea.
strategy. Oh well, I know it was absolutely purposeful. They were deliberately bastardizing the word to mean something else. It did not mean culturally. They did so for reasons of strategy. No, it wasn't.
Okay,
It
but
wasn't just a
it
nor.
means that
It was.
now, right?
I agree with you. I agree with you. But the point is that it was done with malintent. Okay, right now.
I also think you're not understanding that saying that you lack belief in a proposition is not identical to asserting its negation. So someone, what Darth is when he gave you the theist example, what he's trying to say is what would atheists think if he said, I'm a theist, but I don't assert the existence of God. I just lack belief in the not God world. That's what Darth is putting forth.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
it's well known. Darth says that it's a dichotomy, right? So if you're saying I lack
You're
belief
missing the
in
point.
one side of
It's
the dichotomy,
Just
ambiguous.
answer his question.
Saying you lack belief is ambiguous. That's the whole point Darth is getting
Yeah,
to.
let's just say this. Let me just say this real quick. In spite of the disagreement that we're having, at least Slushy is conducting himself like an adult and a gentleman. We don't normally get this. So, in spite of the fact that we disagree, Slushy, I think it's fair to say that we all respect you for your adult way of presenting yourself.
I don't think so. I think there's only like a 10% disagreement here. So you guys, and I agree, people are saying, you're saying that people should be more specific on their terms, right? And that it's preferable if terms don't change, right? I agree. That's fine. All I'm saying is that I think that, if someone explains what they mean by a term, right? That you should be charitable and just accept it that that's what they mean by the term that they just explained, right? So
But Slushy, I
maybe
already responded to that. Like, if it was for something like totally innocuous, then yes. But like in this context, the shifting of the definition of the term shifts the burden and completely obfuscates the conversation. So why, like, you're just making this general pronouncement that, like, as long as the person
Okay.
clarifies what they mean, right? Like, it's
Okay. So, Slushy, whenever I've had this conversation, and I've had it literally hundreds of times with atheists, and they will say, well, why don't you just take it the way I define it? And I said, okay, fine. And then I say to you, what do you call somebody what's a single word that we will use to refer to those who outright deny the existence of God? Do you know what they say 100% of the time?
yeah,
What do they say?
they say atheist, right? And I'm not
Yeah,
disagreeing. That's
and
what the word means.
right, and so what they want to do is they want to use words equivocally. Okay,
So
which is bad. Equivocation is bad.
hang on a second.
Okay.
So I don't even disagree that maybe the change in the usage, right? It could have had some sort of deception intended, just like gay, was started to be used. You said in the 70s. I'll accept that, right? That's fine. But you wouldn't say that anyone who uses that word nowadays, right? Anyone who
That's
wasn't alive then is deceptive, right?
That's only an illustration.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm agreeing.
Okay. Here's the point. What do we call somebody? You ask these people, what do you call somebody who denies the existence of God? And they will say atheist. So they are using the word atheist purposely in an equivocal manner. They're doing it purposely. Okay.
I see. I don't think most people are doing it
Okay. Every person
with some sort of deception.
who has defined atheist as a mere lack of belief to me and insists upon using that in the conversation, I said, okay, I can accept that. Now, what do I call somebody who denies the existence of God? Is there a single word we can use? And they go, yeah, atheist. You see the problem?
So in general, yes, but in that specific conversation, no, because you're all
Okay,
already on the
so
same page.
so slushy. So I'm going to use the word murderer to refer to somebody who kills another person entirely unethically or illegally. But in the same conversation, I'm going to use the word murderer as an EMT who rescues people's lives. I mean, you see the stupidity of that.
It's stupid, yeah. But
Yeah.
if you've
So the
explained
point
it,
is,
then
look,
you could still
okay,
talk to someone about it.
slushy. If we had another single word in the English language which designated somebody who denies the existence of God, that would be fine. But we don't, do we?
Not solely, no.
Right. Now, do we have a word in the English language which has been coined to refer to those who have an absence of positive belief in God, which constitutes the suspension of judgment? Does such a word exist?
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, what's that word?
Yeah, you're going for agnostic, probably.
Right. And so why aren't they using the word agnostic?
I
You have
also think
them.
I think it's even more pervasive because I think really what they're doing is saying like, unless you can establish that God exists, I'm justified in believing that God does not exist, right? Because you haven't met your burden of proof. So it's
Okay,
not
but
just like
let me just interrupt you real quick, 5 seconds. You're changing the topic slightly, which is fine if that's okay with Slushy. We're changing from the definition to the atheist rationale, which is called the presumption of atheism, aka from Anthony Flew. So do you want to switch topics, Slushy? Is that okay with you?
Fine. So let me just wrap up real fast. All I'm merely saying is that someone should have some discursive charity, right? If someone explains their terms, then it doesn't matter. In general, yes, I agree. We should all be more specific with what we mean or what we say. But just as no one growing up today, if they say gay, right, there's no deceptive intent, right? That's what they learn. If a person says that,
Right.
if a person learned atheist means,
But you see,
agnostic, that's fine.
we have another word for somebody who is joyous. We could say they're happy.
Mhm.
Okay. We don't have another word for those who deny the existence of God. Everyone who deploys
Disbeliever, that means that you believe
no,
it's wrong.
a disbeliever is equivalent to saying you're a non-theist.
And that's
In
unbeliever.
in terms of language, unbeliever, disbeliever. In terms of language, it's just the equivalent of saying non-theist.
That's actually
You
how they
see,
should probably define themselves as non-theists. That would be more accurate when they want to do that crap.
yeah, because then the ambiguity would be straightforward, wouldn't it? And
Yeah.
unbeliever or non-believer or non-theist would be co-opting the only word in the English language which designates those who take a positive denial. So if you said, I'm an agnostic, I'm a non-believer, I'm an unbeliever, I'm a non-theist, those terms of ambiguity are fine because they're not co-opting a standard term in the entire English language. Look, let me just say this final note and I'll shut up and everyone else can talk. Either it's the case that the atheists are doing this on purpose with malintent in order to insulate themselves from having to defend their position, or they're doing it because they're stupid.
What if they're not stupid? That's just what they were taught, originally. That's what
No,
it
you
meant,
can't.
right? Just like
Then,
gay.
then,
Just
okay,
like gay.
sir, listen. Every atheist in either camp, those who have malintent and those who are stupid, they all know that there's only one word in the English language which designates those who deny God, and that's atheist. They all know it. Okay? Why do you think Jeffrey J. Lauder, a highly intelligent intellectual, said they shoot themselves in the foot because they don't have an agreed upon definition of atheism?
I've already said I don't disagree with that.
Okay, so
Yeah,
somebody wanted to bring up the presumption of atheism. Okay, you want to go with that?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
So my experience in having these conversations is that like when the person makes the statement that they lack the belief that God exists, basically they seem to be taking the position that like unless you can convince them otherwise, like unless you could establish it's more probably true than not that God exists, then their fallback position is like there is no God. Like they're just it's the default position. It's not like being agnostic. It's actually like there is no God. Like there's no God, there's no leprechauns, there's no fairies. Like they just kind of lump them all together.
That's reasonable.
Same thing. But here's the key. At the end of the conversation, tell them corporate, go ahead and do this.
What's wrong with that?
I can't hear if some Slushy, are you talking?
Yeah, I said, what's wrong with that?